The cursor blinked. One line of code refused to compile. One goddamn semicolon, probably, hiding somewhere in the 700 lines I'd been staring at for the last 3 hours. 2 in the morning. The only sound in my apartment was the low whir of my PC's fan and the distant, constant sigh of city traffic. Apartment 7A, my concrete box in the sky. My job was simple. I was a freelance programmer. I took broken things and I fixed them. Usually, I was good at it. Tonight, my brain felt like scrambled eggs. And then I heard it, a hum. It wasn't the fridge. That old beast had a death rattle, a clunk, and a shudder. This was different. A low, steady, single note. Almost musical, but in a way that set my teeth on edge. Like a fluorescent light bulb about to die, but smoother. I stopped typing, listened. It was faint, a vibration I felt more in my bones than heard with my ears. Seriously? I muttered to the empty room. Probably the guy in 7B, across the hall. Some new, cheap appliance from Amazon. Annoying as hell. I tried to tune it out, my eyes scanning the wall of text on my monitor. Backquote syntax error on line 482. Backquote screw line 482. The hum stopped. Silence rushed in, thick and heavy. For a second, I felt a weird sense of relief. Then it started again. Same note. Same low thrum. I ignored it. My cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. Blink. Hum. Blink. Hum. Wait a minute. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I watched the cursor. A steady white vertical line. It vanished. It reappeared. And the sound, that goddamn hum, pulsed in perfect time with it. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence. I nudged the mouse. The cursor stopped blinking, staying solid. The hum died. My breath hitched. I let go of the mouse. The cursor resumed its rhythmic blinking, and the hum returned, a loyal dog answering its master's whistle. Blink. Hum. Blink. Hum. No way, I whispered. This wasn't some guy's fridge. This wasn't a coincidence. My heart started a low, heavy beat that was completely out of sync with the noise. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was that feeling you get when the world tilts a few degrees off its axis. Annoyance turned to a sharp, focused unease. What the hell was this? Mammon. I pushed my chair back, the wheels groaning on the hardwood floor. I had to see. I walked to the window, the one that looked out onto the narrow, poorly lit access balcony we all shared. Rain slicked the concrete. The light from my monitor cast a blue rectangle on the wet ground. I looked across the walkway to apartment 7B. A woman lived there. Maybe. I'd seen her once or twice. Dark hair. Always looked tired. We did the typical big city neighbor thing, a quick nod, never making eye contact. Her blinds were drawn tight, a pale, blank rectangle in the gloom. No lights on. No sign of life. The hum didn't seem to be coming from there. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, and nowhere. I let the curtain fall, turned around, and I stopped breathing. My monitor was no longer showing my code. The screen was black, then flickered to life with a new image. It wasn't one of my screensavers. I didn't have any screensavers. I'd turned them all off. It was a hallway. A long, narrow hallway, shot from a low angle like I was kneeling. The walls were stained with water and what looked like rust. The paint was peeling in long, leprous strips. At the far end, there was a single, bare bulb casting a sickly yellow light that didn't quite reach the foreground, leaving me in shadow. It was a place of deep decay, a place that felt wrong. Then, the sound came again. But it wasn't a faint vibration in the air anymore. It was coming from my speakers. Loud. Clear. The same single, resonant hum, now filling my small apartment. It vibrated through the desk, up my arms. My blood ran cold. He's in my network. That was the first logical thought my panicked brain could grab. Some hacker. Some creep from across the hall getting his kicks. I grabbed the mouse, shoved it across the pad. Nothing. The cursor was gone. The image of the hallway remained, unmoving, like a photograph of a dead place. I slammed the escape key. Control-Alt-Delete. Nothing. The machine was completely locked. The hum just kept going. A flat, endless note of absolute control. He wasn't just in my network. He was in my computer. In my room. My heart was a fist banging against my ribs. I scrambled for the power button on the tower. My finger jabbed it, held it down. 5 seconds. 10. The machine should have shut down. It didn't. The fans kept whirring. The screen stayed lit, displaying that filthy hallway. And the hum from the speakers didn't even waver. It was impossible. A hard shutdown was a physical cutoff. It couldn't fail. "What the hell do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The only reply was the unwavering hum. Exhaustion and adrenaline make for a bad cocktail. My thoughts were a mess. Call the cops and say what? My computer has a scary picture on it? They'd think I was high. I sank back into my gaming chair, my eyes glued to the screen. The image didn't change. It was just a static picture, but it felt like it was watching me. The darkness in the foreground of the picture felt like an open mouth. My head was heavy. My eyelids felt like lead shutters. I fought it, but the last 3 hours of staring at code, the late hour, the sheer mind-bending weirdness of it all, it was a knockout blow. My head slumped forward. Just for a second. I'll just rest my eyes for a second. The smell hit me first. Damp earth. Rot. The coppery tang of old rust. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't in my chair. I was on my knees, on a floor of cracked, grimy linoleum. Cold seeped through my jeans. I was in the hallway. The hallway from the screen. The low, bare bulb swayed gently at the far end, casting long, dancing shadows. The air was thick and cold, each breath a painful little cloud in front of my face. The hum was all around me, inside me, a pressure in my skull that threatened to crack it open. This wasn't a dream. It felt too real. The texture of the grimy floor under my palms, the specific smell of decay. My mind couldn't have made this up. I tried to stand. My legs wouldn't obey. It was like the wires from my brain to my muscles had been cut. I was paralyzed from the waist down. Panic, pure and undiluted, flooded my system. I opened my mouth to scream, but only a choked, wet gasp came out. No sound. My voice was gone. Then I saw it. In the deepest shadows at the far end of the hall, something moved. It detached itself from the blackness. It was tall, impossibly thin, like a sketch of a man drawn with a piece of charcoal. It had no face, just a smooth, pale oval where features should have been. It started to move toward me. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It flowed. A silent, terrifying glide over the filthy floor, its long limbs swaying unnaturally. The hum grew louder, more intense, drilling into my head. I scrabbled backward with my hands, my palms scraping on grit and God knows what else. My legs dragged behind me, useless. A sob caught in my throat, silent and agonizing. The thing was getting closer. Faster. It covered half the distance of the hall in a heartbeat. It was 10 feet away. I could see its hands. They were long and skeletal, with fingers that ended in dirty, sharp-looking points. They weren't fingers. They were twigs, dry and brittle. It raised one hand. It lunged. The last thing I saw was that hand, those 5 sharp points, reaching for my face. I jolted awake with a violent shudder, a scream finally tearing from my throat. My head snapped back, cracking against the headrest of my chair. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I was in my apartment. My chair. The room was silent. Absolutely silent. The hum was gone. My eyes darted to the monitor. It was displaying my code, the line with the syntax error still highlighted, the cursor blinking innocently. It was all normal. Everything was exactly as it had been before the hum started. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. I slumped in the chair, sweat plastering my t-shirt to my back. A dream. A bullshit, stress-fueled nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. The locked computer, the hallway, the faceless thing. Just a vivid, horrible dream. I laughed. A shaky, pathetic sound. God, I needed to get some sleep. The relief was so intense it felt like a physical weight lifting off my chest. I reached up to rub my tired eyes, then decided to just call it a night. I'd fix the code in the morning. I leaned forward to reach for the power button on the monitor, my head moving away from the leather headrest. That's when I saw it. Resting on the smooth black fake leather of my gaming chair, right where my head had just been, was a feather. It wasn't a small downy thing. It was long, at least 6 inches. It was jet black, a deep, oily black that seemed to drink the light from my monitor. It was a crow's feather. Perfect, sleek, and utterly, completely impossible. I stared. My mind refused to process it. There were no crows in my apartment. My windows were closed. I hadn't been outside in 2 days. It couldn't be there. But it was. I didn't dare touch it. I just stared, and the silence in the room became a roaring vacuum. The line between the nightmare and my apartment didn't just blur. It vanished. The dream hadn't ended when I woke up. It had followed me out. The box from Etsy felt lighter than it should have. I slit the tape with my X-Acto knife and pulled out a spider web of leather and thread. The dream catcher was bigger than I expected, woven from dark brown suede, with a storm of black and gray feathers hanging from the bottom. It looked old, authentic. Not like the cheap, brightly colored crap they sell at tourist traps. I needed something authentic. My sleep had been garbage for weeks, filled with the usual freelance illustrator's anxiety dreams, missed deadlines, corrupted files, clients who paid in exposure. My workstation was a controlled mess of ink pots, micron pens, and a tablet that cost more than my first car. Apartment 7B, my 12 by 15-foot sanctuary and prison. I held the dream catcher up, trying to find the right spot. The window seemed too obvious. Maybe over the door, to catch bad vibes before they even got in. That's when I heard it. A knock. So soft I almost missed it. A light tap-tap on my apartment door. I froze, holding the dream catcher mid-air. It was almost 3 in the morning. Deliveries didn't come at this hour. My neighbor across the hall, the quiet coder from 7A, was more likely to slide a note under the door than to knock. Probably just the building settling. This place was old, a brick shoebox full of groans and sighs. I dismissed it. My eyes went back to the wall. The hook for my calendar looked sturdy enough. It came again. This time, it wasn't random. It was a rhythm. Deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. My hands stopped moving. The blood in my veins seemed to slow down, to thicken. That rhythm. I knew that rhythm. A cold wave washed over me that had nothing to do with the draft from the window. It was a fragment of a song. A lullaby my mother used to hum when I was small to stop me from having nightmares. A stupid, forgotten little tune. And someone was tapping it on my door at 3 a.m. What the hell? Percy, this wasn't a building anymore, this was a person. My heart started a low, heavy drum against my ribs. I put the dream catcher down on my desk, the feathers making a soft rustle. I moved toward the door, my bare feet silent on the cold wood floor. My breath hitched in my throat. I told myself it was some drunk on the wrong floor. A dumb prank. But the rhythm was too specific. Too personal. I leaned forward, my forehead almost touching the cool metal of the door. I put my eye to the peephole. The fisheye lens showed me the hallway. Empty. The sickly yellow light from the overhead fixture cast long, distorted shadows. The door to 7A was closed tight. No one was there. The scuffed linoleum floor was completely bare. I stared, waiting for someone to jump out from the corner. Nothing. Just an empty, silent hallway. I pulled back, a nervous tremor starting in my hand. Did I imagine it? Was I that tired? I stood there for a full minute, just listening. The only sound was the hum of my own refrigerator. The silence felt wrong. It felt loud. Okay, Mai. Get a grip. You're overtired. You're imagining things. I turned away from the door, my shoulders tight. I walked back to my desk, picked up a pen, and tried to focus on the half-finished sketch on my tablet. A snarling wolf for some indie book cover. It looked stupid. I couldn't focus. I kept seeing the empty hallway in my head. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. The sound wasn't at the door anymore. It came from the window. Louder this time. A sharp, clear rap against the glass. I jumped, a small, choked gasp escaping my lips. My chair scraped backward on the floor. I stared at the window. The blinds were drawn, thick white vinyl slats blocking the view of the access balcony outside. But the sound had been right there. Unmistakable. 7 floors up. Who the hell was tapping on my window 7 floors up? My mind went blank. Every rational explanation evaporated. Drunk. Prank. Wrong floor. None of it worked anymore. My heart was hammering now, a frantic, wild bird trapped in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed the heavy glass paperweight from my desk, my hands slick with sweat. This is real. This is happening. I crept toward the window, my knuckles white around the paperweight. I reached for the cord on the blinds, my fingers fumbling. I had to see. I had to know what was out there. I took a deep, shaky breath and yanked the cord. The blinds snapped open with a loud clatter. Nothing. Just the wet concrete of the narrow balcony. Rain falling in a silent, steady sheet. The orange glow of the streetlights below reflecting on the slick surface. Empty. There was nowhere to stand, nowhere to hide. Just a sheer drop to the alley 100 feet below. But it had been right there. The sound. So clear. I felt a wave of dizziness. My head was pounding. Too much coffee. Not enough sleep. That had to be it. My brain was short-circuiting, manufacturing sounds. It was the only explanation that didn't make me want to scream. I let the blind fall shut, the slats clacking back into place. Enough. I was done for the night. The wolf could wait. I shut down my tablet, turned off the desk lamp, and stumbled toward my bedroom. The apartment felt different now. Bigger. Darker. Every shadow seemed to hold a shape. I left the hall light on, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I fell into bed, my clothes still on. I pulled the covers up to my chin. My body was exhausted, but my mind was a racetrack. The rhythm kept playing in my head. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Over and over. A broken record of a memory I didn't want. I closed my eyes. Prayed for sleep to just take me. To just end the day. And it did. The smell hit me first. Damp rot. Old iron and wet concrete. My eyes opened. I wasn't in my bed. I was standing in a hallway. The air was cold. So cold I could see my breath. A single, bare bulb hung from a frayed wire at the far end, swinging just enough to make the shadows writhe. The walls were stained and peeling. The floor was filthy tile, cracked and broken. A hum. A low, resonant sound that vibrated in my teeth, in my bones. It pulsed with a familiar rhythm. Hum, hum, hum. Pause. Hum. The knocking. It was the knocking. Turned into a sound. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just any dream. Then I saw him. A little way down the hall, his back to me. A man. He was on his knees, scrambling backward, his hands scraping on the dirty floor. I could see the terror in the line of his shoulders, the frantic, useless way his legs dragged behind him. It was the guy from 7A. The programmer. What was he doing here? What was I doing here? I tried to call out to him. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My voice was gone. A tight band of fear squeezed my chest. I tried to take a step toward him, to help him. My feet were stuck. Glued to the floor. I was a statue, a helpless observer. The hum grew louder, filling my head. The man's silent panic was contagious. I could feel his terror washing over me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was forced to watch. Then I felt it, a change in the air behind me. A drop in temperature, a sudden deep pocket of silence inside the hum. Something was there. I tried to turn my head. I couldn't. My body was a prison. but I could feel its presence. A tall, cold shape blotting out the little light there was. It wasn't interested in the man on the floor. I felt its attention, a physical weight, land on me. It moved. It wasn't a walk. It was a fluid, silent surge of darkness. It flowed past me, a flicker in my peripheral vision. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin, a silhouette of a man made from stretched-out shadows. It shot down the hall. For a second, I thought it was going for the programmer. A wave of relief, sick and twisted, washed over me. But it didn't stop. It bypassed him completely, ignoring his panicked form as if he were a piece of furniture. It was coming for me. No, not for me. It had appeared behind me. It was behind me. It hadn't moved past me. It had come from behind me and was now in front of me, turning around. It stopped, 20 feet away. It had no face. Just a smooth, blank oval of pale skin, like an eggshell. It raised a hand. The fingers were long, too long, like dry twigs snapped from a dead tree, ending in sharp points. The hum stopped. Absolute silence. And it lunged, not at my face, not at my chest. It lunged for my arm. The twig-like fingers clamped down on my bicep. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot through me. It wasn't dream pain. It was real. A sharp, tearing agony. I felt the points of its fingers dig into my flesh, scraping against the bone. I tried to scream, but the sound was strangled in my throat, a wet, useless gurgle. I thrashed, but its grip was like iron. I was looking right at its featureless face as it held me, its grip tightening, the pain escalating into a pure, clean fire. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that tore my throat. My eyes flew open. I was in my bed, tangled in my sheets, which were damp with sweat. My heart was a battering ram against my ribs. I was gasping, sucking in air like a drowning woman. The morning sun was a pale slit of gray light through the blinds. My room. I was in my room. It was over. A dream. It was just a nightmare. A goddamn horrible nightmare. Relief came so fast it made me feel sick. I fell back against my pillows, my body trembling. I laughed, a shaky, broken sound. Jesus Christ, I whispered to the empty room. I took a deep breath, then another. The panic began to recede, leaving a hollowed-out exhaustion in its place. I wanted a shower. I wanted to wash the feeling of that hallway, that grip, off my skin. My arm throbbed. A dull, pulsing ache. The same arm, my left bicep. I sat up slowly. My mind was screaming at me not to look. Just get up. Just start the day. Pretend it didn't happen. But I had to. I had to know. My hand was shaking as I pushed the sleeve of my t-shirt up my arm. I looked down, and the air left my lungs in a single, silent rush. It wasn't a bruise. It was 3 long, parallel lines, scratched deep into my skin. They were angry and red, the flesh around them raised and puffy. In the center of each scratch, tiny beads of bright red blood were welling up, a perfect, horrifying confirmation. They were exactly where its fingers had been, exactly where I had felt the pain. I stared. My mind simply refused to connect what my eyes were seeing with what was possible. It couldn't be real. But the blood was real. The pain was real. My eyes darted around the room, finally landing on the desk in the corner. The new dream catcher lay there, its black feathers still and silent. It hadn't worked. It hadn't caught the nightmare. The nightmare had caught me. The first thing I did was make coffee. It tasted like ash. Sleep hadn't come, not real sleep. Just a series of frantic, shallow dives into darkness, jerking awake every time my arm throbbed or a floorboard creaked. I spent hours staring at the 3 red lines on my bicep. They weren't fading. If anything, the skin around them was a darker, angrier purple. It was real. That thought kept circling in my head. A vulture over a corpse. It was real. The trash was starting to smell. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to do something normal, something that didn't involve staring at my own wounds and questioning my sanity. Taking out the trash felt like a monumental act of pretending everything was okay. I grabbed the bag, the plastic crinkling loudly in the quiet apartment. I unlocked the 3 locks on my door, the deadbolt, the chain, the knob, and pulled it open. The hallway was empty, bathed in that familiar, ugly yellow light. And then the door to 7A opened. It was him, the programmer. The guy from the dream. He looked like shit. His hair was a wreck, sticking up in clumps like he'd been pulling at it all night. The dark circles under his eyes were so deep they looked like bruises. He was holding a small trash bag of his own, mostly takeout containers and empty cans of something caffeinated. Our eyes met. For a second, there was just the usual awkward neighbor acknowledgement. A brief, tired nod. We'd done this 100 times before. The silent ritual of 2 people who live 3 feet apart but know nothing about each other. I stepped out, letting my door click shut behind me. It was only after I took the first step toward the incinerator chute at the end of the hall that I realized he hadn't moved. He was just standing in his doorway, staring at me. No, not at me, at my arm. My left arm. I was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt. The bandage I'd taped over the scratches was stark white against my skin. It was clumsy, sloppy, the kind of first aid you do when your hands are shaking too badly to make it neat. He took a step out of his apartment. "Sorry," he said. His voice was rough, dry. "This is weird. But are you okay?" I clutched my trash bag tighter. "Yeah, fine, just a scratch." My voice was a lie, and we both knew it. He walked past me, heading for the chute. I followed, keeping my distance. The silence was heavy. I just wanted to drop the bag and get back inside my apartment, back behind my 3 locks. He tossed his bag in, the metal flap clanging shut. I did the same. Mission accomplished. Time to go. I turned. He was standing right there, blocking my path back to my door. "Look, I know this is going to sound crazy," he started, running a hand through his already messed up hair. "And you have every right to tell me to get lost. But did you hear anything last night? Anything strange?" My heart gave a hard, single thump against my ribs. "Like what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Like a sound, a kind of hum." I stared at him. Really stared at him. The unshaven jaw, the exhausted, desperate look in his eyes. It was the same desperation I'd seen on his face in the dream, when he was scrambling backward on that filthy floor. He must have seen something in my face, because he kept going, the words spilling out of him now. It started around 3. A knock first. A rhythm. Then the sound moved to my window. I couldn't breathe. My throat was tight. "It was on my door," I said, "and my window, a lullaby." His eyes widened. The fake, neighborly calm was gone. Now we were just 2 terrified people in a dingy hallway. "It's not just the knock," he said, his voice dropping lower, more intense. I had a dream. I was in this hallway. It was wrong, old, and you were there." The blood drained from my face. "You were on the floor," I heard myself say, "scrambling away from something. And you were standing, frozen," he finished for me. "You couldn't move. You were just staring. And it came for you." We stood there, the reality of it settling between us like a physical weight. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a fluke. We were in the same nightmare. "It got me," I said, the words feeling like glass in my mouth. I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to show someone. My fingers fumbled with the edge of the medical tape. I peeled back the bandage, my own skin cold to the touch. The 3 red lines stared up at us from my bicep. He made a choked sound. He didn't look disgusted. He looked horrified. He looked like he was seeing proof of something he desperately wanted to be fake. I thought I was losing my mind," he whispered. "When I woke up, I found this." He reached into the pocket of his jeans. His hand came out, and he uncurled his fingers. Lying in his palm, stark and black against his skin, was a single feather. A crow's feather. It was thick and glossy, but the tip was broken off, jagged. "It was on my pillow," he said. "There are no crows around here, not on the 7th floor. The dream catcher. The storm of black and gray feathers." I felt a wave of nausea. "The thing that grabbed me," I said, my voice shaking. "The thing with no face. Its fingers. They were sharp. They felt like—" I couldn't finish the sentence. We just looked at each other. The suspicion, the stranger danger instinct that a city grinds into you, it was all gone, replaced by a far more primal fear, the fear of the unknown, and the horrifying certainty that we were in it together. His name was Alex. Mine was Mai. We introduced ourselves in the hushed, stunned tones of plane crash survivors. "What is it?" I asked. The question hung in the air, huge and impossible to answer. "I don't know," Alex said, shaking his head. "But it's not just a dream. It leaves things behind. It leaves—" He gestured toward my arm. "Marks." The world had shrunk. It was no longer a city of millions, a building of dozens. It was just this hallway. Just the two of us. 2 data points confirming an impossible equation. The silence stretched on, filled with the hum of the old light fixture overhead. My apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Nowhere did. Because the thing didn't need a key. It came through your head, and just as that thought solidified, a new sound cut through the quiet. A vibration. It was my phone, in my pocket. A sharp, insistent buzz. At the exact same moment, Alex flinched. He reached into his own pocket. We pulled out our phones. We looked at each other, then down at our screens. My blood ran cold. A new message. From unknown number. It was one word. Saw. I looked up at Alex. His face was a mask of pure terror. He held up his phone. The same screen. The same message. The same word. Saw. It wasn't a memory of a nightmare. It wasn't a shared delusion. It was here. Now. Watching us. Aware that we were talking. Aware that we knew. The circle wasn't just constricting. The loop had closed. "No," I whispered. "No way." My fingers felt numb, clumsy. I hit the call button on the unknown number. It was a dumb, reflexive action, a desperate need for an answer, for a human voice on the other end. The phone went to my ear. Static. Not the gentle hiss of a bad connection. This was a loud, aggressive roar of white noise, like a waterfall of broken data. I held it away from my ear, wincing. "What is it?" Alex asked, his eyes wide. "Nothing, just static," I said. He did the same, pressing his own phone to his ear. His expression mirrored mine. He was hearing the same wall of noise. We stood there, a foot apart, 2 people listening to a screaming void. Then it changed. From deep inside the roar of static on my phone, a new sound began to surface. It was faint at first, then clearer. A giggle, a child's giggle, high-pitched, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was a sound of pure, cruel amusement. It layered over the static, a melody of malice. I dropped my hand, staring at my phone as if it were a snake. Alex's face went white. He'd heard it too. The giggling continued for 1 more second, echoing from both our phones in perfect, horrifying unison. Then, with a final, sharp click, the calls ended. Both of them, at the exact same time. We just stood there, in the silent hallway, trapped. The laughter was gone, but I could still hear it. An echo burned directly into my brain, a permanent scar. The hallway felt too small. The yellow light was sick. My phone felt like a dead thing in my hand. That giggle was still in my ears, a needle of ice in my brain. "Inside," I said. The word came out like a croak. "Come inside." I couldn't stand in that hallway another second. It wasn't safe. The message proved it. The giggle proved it. It knew we were together. Alex just nodded, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked as broken as I felt. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers clumsy. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door, and we both practically fell inside my apartment. I slammed it shut behind us, twisting the deadbolt. The sound was loud in the sudden quiet. 3 locks. A joke. The thing didn't use doors. We stood in my small living room, two strangers breathing the same stale air. The space, my space, felt instantly different with him in it. Violated. Not by him, but by the reason he was here. He wasn't looking at me. His head was tilted, his eyes narrowed, scanning the room. Listening. "What is it?" I asked, my voice a whisper. "That sound," he said, his own voice low. "The hum. The one from the phone call, under the static. It's here." I listened. My heart was a hammer in my chest, but underneath it, yes, it was there. A low, almost subsonic vibration. The kind of sound you feel in your teeth more than you hear with your ears. I'd gotten so used to it over the past few days I'd stopped noticing. I had chalked it up to the old building's wiring, the refrigerator, anything. Alex took a slow step toward the window, his eyes fixed on the wall next to it. And then I saw what he was looking at. "No," I breathed. Hanging from a small nail was the dream catcher. Feathers. Black beads. A web of dark thread. I'd bought it a week ago. I thought it looked cool. Vintage. Now it looked like a threat. It's that," Alex said, pointing with a shaky finger. "The sound. It's coming from that." My blood ran cold. The dream catcher. The storm of feathers from the nightmare. The crow's feather on his pillow. It all snapped together with a sickening click. "I just bought it," I said, my voice defensive, as if it were my fault. "Online, from an antique site." I had to prove it. I had to see it for myself, to show him. To show myself that this was just a thing. A stupid, handmade object. I scrambled for my laptop on the coffee table, flipping it open. My hands were shaking so hard I mistyped my password twice. The screen flared to life. Browser history. I clicked the link. The page loaded. A small, independent seller. Curiosities and remnants. There it was. A picture of the exact same dream catcher. And below it, the product description. My eyes scanned the words, and the floor dropped out from under me. Item number 413. Nocturne filter, authentic. Provenance. Recovered from the ruins of the Blackwood Asylum for the Mentally Afflicted. Closed 1974. These artifacts were crafted by staff in the quiet rooms, under the belief they could catch or filter the violent nightmares of the most disturbed patients. Said to absorb and hold residual psychic energy, sold as a curio only. We are not responsible for any experienced phenomena. Alex read it over my shoulder. I heard him take a sharp breath. Filter the nightmares, he read aloud, his voice hollow. It doesn't filter them. It records them. It's a goddamn antenna. An antenna. And we had both just tuned in. The hum suddenly seemed louder, the air in the room heavier. That thing on my wall wasn't a decoration. It was a listening device, a doorway. My mind reeled. It had been here the whole time. In my home, humming, waiting. It had latched onto me first. Then, through the thin walls, through the simple proximity of our lives, it had reached for him, a psychic parasite, just like he said, and this was its nest. Alex took a step closer to the dream catcher. He was staring at it with a mix of fear and grim determination. He looked like a man about to poke a sleeping snake. "Don't," I said, the word catching in my throat. "We have to," he said, not looking at me. "We can't just leave it there." He reached out a hand, slow, cautious. His fingers were inches away from the lowest hanging black feather. The moment his skin made contact, it happened. The lamp on my end table flickered once, twice. A loud, electrical buzz ripped through the air. Then the bulb exploded with a sharp pop. Darkness swallowed the room. Absolute. Total. The hum was gone. In its place was a new sound. It wasn't a hum anymore. It was a clear, high-pitched tone. A single, piercing note that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It drilled into my skull, sharp and clean and full of hate. Then, from the direction of the front door. Slam! The sound was so violent, it shook the floorboards. The deadbolt. It sounded like someone had thrown a sledgehammer against it from the other side. We were locked in. "My!" Alex's voice was a raw shout in the dark. "I'm here!" I couldn't see him. I couldn't see anything. Just the faint gray rectangle of the window against the city's night glow. The piercing tone wavered, then stopped. And the silence that followed was worse. It was a listening silence. A waiting silence. Then came the new sound. It started near the kitchen. A slow, wet, dragging shh lump. Shh lump. It wasn't the sound of shoes. It wasn't the sound of bare feet. It was the sound of something heavy and soaked being dragged across my floor. It was in the apartment with us. My breath hitched. I couldn't move. I was frozen, just like in the dream. A hand grabbed my arm, hard. I screamed, a short, choked sound. "It's me! Get down!" Alex's voice, a harsh whisper, right by my ear. He pulled me, hard. I stumbled, my legs like water, and we fell together behind the low back of my sofa. He clamped a hand over my mouth. I could feel his body trembling next to mine. Or maybe it was me. I couldn't tell. We crouched in the dark, my face pressed into the cheap fabric of the couch cushions. I held my breath, straining to hear. Slump, slump. It was closer now, moving through the small living room. It was taking its time. Exploring, hunting. My heart beat a frantic, silent rhythm against my ribs. "Please, please don't find us." The dragging sound stopped. Right on the other side of the sofa. My entire body went rigid. I could feel Alex's hand tighten over my mouth. His own breathing stopped. It was here. Inches away. The silence stretched. Tight and thin and screaming. I could smell it now. The smell from the dream. Damp earth. Old, wet basements. And rust. A sharp, metallic tang, like old blood. A shadow fell over us. I saw it against the back of the sofa. Against the floor. It blotted out the faint gray light from the window. It was tall. Impossibly tall. A long, thin silhouette that stretched up, bending over the top of the sofa to look down at us. It had no discernible features. Just a long, black shape of a head on a stick-thin neck. It was a child's drawing of a monster, made real. It lowered its head slowly, inquisitively. I was going to die. Here, behind my own sofa. The thought was calm, clear, and absolute. Then the lights came back on. Not a flicker. They just snapped on. The standing lamp. The overhead light in the kitchen. Full, blinding brightness. The shadow was gone. The sound was gone. The smell was fading. Alex snatched his hand away from my mouth. We both stayed crouched for a long moment, blinking in the sudden light, chests heaving. The apartment was exactly as it had been. My laptop was still open on the coffee table. The shattered remains of the lamp bulb were on the floor. Everything was normal. Empty. Slowly, like two old people, we pushed ourselves up. Alex's eyes were wide, darting around the empty room. He looked at the door. It was still shut, the deadbolt still thrown. I looked at the wall by the window. The dream catcher was still hanging there. Still. Silent, a thing of feathers and thread. It was impossible. We imagined it. A shared hallucination brought on by terror. That had to be it. My eyes drifted down from the dream catcher to the wooden floor beneath it, where the shadow had stood. There, on the polished hardwood, was a puddle. It wasn't large. Maybe the size of a dinner plate. It was a slick of something black and thick, like oil mixed with mud. It glistened under the electric light. It hadn't been there before. I took a shaky step toward it. Alex saw it at the same time. He let out a low curse. As I got closer, the smell hit me again, stronger this time. Not imagined. Real. The wet, cloying stench of mold and the sharp, coppery smell of rust, the smell of the dream. the smell from behind the sofa. It was real. It had stood right there, in my home, and it had left something behind. A stain, a scar on the floor of my apartment. Proof. The world wasn't a loop anymore. The nightmare wasn't just in our heads. It had crossed over. It was in the room with us, and it could come back whenever it wanted to. I didn't run back to my apartment. I walked, a slow, deliberate pace that felt completely fake. Like I was a man on a stage, and something was watching from the wings. The puddle. The smell. That black, oily stain on Mai's floor was proof. My brain kept replaying the image of it, glistening under the light. It was a signature. A calling card left in the wake of that impossible shadow. My own apartment, 7A, didn't feel like a refuge. It felt like the next target. I fumbled with the keys, my hand shaking so bad I dropped them once. The metallic clatter on the concrete floor was loud, too loud. I snatched them up, unlocked the door, and slipped inside, slamming it shut behind me. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy thunk, a useless gesture, a prayer to a god of metal and wood that had no power here. The air in my place felt heavy. The silence was wrong. It wasn't empty, it was listening. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Mai's contact. What do you even say? Hey, the nightmare monster just bled all over your floor, you good? My phone buzzed before I could type. A message from her. Stay awake. Whatever you do, don't sleep. I typed back a single word. Okay. A pact. A flimsy little shield made of pixels. We were two soldiers in separate foxholes, communicating by signal fire while the enemy tunneled beneath us. Stay awake. Right. I went to the kitchen and flicked on the switch for the electric kettle. Coffee. Black. Strong enough to strip paint. The motions were automatic, something my body knew how to do even when my mind was screaming. Fill the kettle. Spoon grounds into the French press. Wait for the water to boil. Normal things. It was a lie, but it was a lie I needed. While the water heated, I sat down at my small desk, the worn wood cool against my forearms. My laptop was already on. Work. I had a deadline. Something about marketing analytics that felt like a message from a different planet now. Maybe if I stared at spreadsheets long enough, the world would start making sense again. Numbers were clean. They didn't leave oily black stains on the floor. The kettle shrieked. I poured the water, pushed the plunger down on the coffee, and filled a mug. The steam was hot on my face. Real. I took a sip. It was bitter and scalding, just what I needed. Back at the desk, I tried to focus on the numbers, clicks, conversions, bounce rates. Meaningless. My eyes kept darting to the corners of the room, to the dark slit under the closet door. Every creak of the old building was a footstep. Every hum from the refrigerator was that hum, the one that came from the Dreamcatcher. A small notification popped up in the corner of my screen. An email. I almost ignored it. Probably spam. But the subject line caught my eye. It was just a single symbol, a forward slash. Slash dot. The sender was a jumble of letters and numbers. no-reply-share.g-drive.413@archive.net. Weird. But the 413, where had I seen that? My blood went cold. The Dreamcatcher. Item number 413. Nocturne filter. My hand holding the mouse was trembling. This wasn't spam. This was a message. My heart hammered against my ribs. A part of my brain, the rational part, screamed at me not to click, delete it, shut down the computer, throw it out the window. But I couldn't. It was a clue. It was a threat. And you don't ignore a threat when it knows your address. I clicked. It opened a Google Drive link. The page was blank except for one file in the middle of the screen, an audio file. The name made the breath catch in my throat. your_lullaby.mp3. The lullaby Mai had told me about. The one from her dream. The one the thing hummed before it. I didn't click play. My hand wasn't even on the mouse. But it didn't matter. The file played anyway. The sound that came out of my cheap laptop speakers wasn't loud. It was thin. Tinny. A distorted, off-key melody that scraped at the inside of my skull. It was the sound of a broken music box, recorded from a long way down a dark well. It was the most hateful sound I had ever heard. It filled the small apartment, twisting the already wrong silence into something sharp and menacing. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound cut off instantly, but the melody was still there, echoing in my head. My phone rang. The screen lit up with Mai's picture. My hand was shaking so hard it took me 2 tries to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear. Mai? I didn't hear a hello, just a ragged, sobbing breath, a sound of pure terror. Logan, she wept, her voice cracking. Logan, in my closet. It's in my closet. My entire body went rigid. What is? Mai? What do you see? The singing, she choked out. It's coming from inside. Oh God, the door is... A sound cut her off. A sharp click. Then nothing. Mai? I shouted into the phone. Mai, are you there? Silence. Not a dropped call silence. It was a deadline silence. The kind where you know the connection is still active, but the person on the other end is gone. M-A-I? Nothing. I wasn't thinking. There was no room for thought. There was only fire and ice in my veins. The lullaby. Her closet. The deadline. My eyes fell on the baseball bat. I kept propped in the corner by the door, a relic from a high school career I'd mostly forgotten. It was heavy in my hand. Solid. Real. I didn't bother with the peephole. I wrenched the deadbolt back and yanked the door open, ready to cross the hall, ready to kick her door down, ready to face whatever the hell was in her closet. I burst into the hallway, bat raised, and stopped dead. Mai was already standing there. She was standing at her own open door, across the hall. She wasn't on the phone. She wasn't crying. She was just standing there, staring, not at me, but past me, into my apartment. Her face was a mask of confusion and horror. Logan, she stammered, her voice a small, broken thing. What? What were you doing in my closet? The words didn't compute. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. I had just heard her. On the phone. Crying. About her closet. But she was right there. Looking at me. Accusing me. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice a raw croak. You just called me. You said... I didn't call you, she said, shaking her head slowly, her eyes wide and locked on my apartment. My phone, it's in my room. I heard singing. That song. It was coming from your place. From your closet. My heart stopped. Her words hung in the stale hallway air, an impossible, sickening paradox. We both heard it. We both heard it coming from the other's apartment. Slowly, like a man turning to face a firing squad, I turned back to look into my own apartment. My gaze went past the desk, past the little kitchen, to my bedroom closet. The door, which I always kept shut tight, was now open. Just a crack, a 6-inch black gap, leading into darkness. It played with us. It was gaslighting us in real time, using our own homes as weapons, turning us against each other. The thing was a virtuoso of fear. As Mai and I stood frozen in the hallway, 2 statues carved from ice, something moved in that dark gap. It wasn't a shape. It wasn't a monster. It was a hand. A long, thin, skeletal hand. The skin was the color of charcoal, stretched tight over bony knuckles. It looked like it had been pulled from a fire. It reached out slowly, deliberately, from the darkness inside my closet. It didn't reach for me. It didn't reach for Mai. It moved down towards the floor. In its grasp was a phone, a white case with a small crack in the corner. Mai's phone. The hand placed the phone gently on the hardwood floor just inside my doorway, as if offering a gift. Then, just as slowly, it retracted back into the blackness of the closet. The door creaked slightly, but didn't close. It remained ajar. An invitation. We stared at the phone. It sat on the floor, an alien object in a world that had completely broken down. It shouldn't be there. It couldn't be there. The screen lit up. Drawn by some unseen force, I took a step forward. Mai took a hesitant step behind me. We both leaned over, looking down at the illuminated screen. It was a photo that had just been taken. It was of Mai. She was asleep in her bed, her face peaceful, turned to one side. The photo was taken from a vantage point just a few feet away. Someone, or something, had been standing right next to her bed as she slept, and it was still there in the picture. Looming over her sleeping form was a shadow. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a black cutout against the dim light of her room. It had no face, no features, just a long black shape with a gaunt head that was tilted down, looking at her. The same shape I had seen behind my sofa, the shadow that had left the stain. It had been in her room, it had been in my closet, it had been in both places at once. And it had taken a picture, a trophy, a promise. A scar burned onto a screen, showing us exactly how helpless we were. It wasn't just in our dreams anymore. It wasn't just in our apartments. It was in our pockets. It was everywhere. And it was always, always watching. We didn't go back to her apartment. We couldn't. The phone lay on the floorboards of my doorway, a tombstone for sanity. I grabbed it. Mai snatched her keys. We slammed my door, 7A, and locked it. Then we ran across the hall, unlocked her door, 7B, grabbed the dream catcher off her wall, ran back to my place, and slammed the door again. A frantic, stupid ballet of terror. We stood in the middle of my living room, panting, two prisoners who had just consolidated their cells. "It can't stay out," she said, her voice thin. She was holding the dream catcher like a dead animal, away from her body. The black feathers looked dusty in the harsh light of my apartment. The central bead was like a dead eye. I know. My brain was a mess of scrambled wires, but one thought pushed through. Containment. A desperate, idiotic idea, but it was the only one I had. My kitchen. There's a cookie tin. An old one. It was a stupid, floral-patterned metal box my mom had given me years ago, full of oatmeal raisin cookies I never ate. We found it in the back of a cupboard. Mai practically threw the dream catcher inside. I slammed the lid on. The metal squealed. It was a cheap, flimsy thing. But it was metal. It was a box. It felt like an action. It felt like fighting back, even if we were just fighting with kitchenware. We stuffed the tin back into the deepest, darkest corner of the cupboard, behind a stack of plates I never used. Safety. The word was a joke. We didn't talk about sleeping. The message on her phone was clear enough. Stay awake. We were in this together now, trapped in my small apartment. The space felt smaller, with two people, the air thicker. Every shadow was wrong. Every noise from the pipes was a footstep. The pact was forged in shared panic, but it was a brittle thing. Fear makes you selfish. Fear makes you look for a cause, a reason. And when there are only two people in a room, the math is simple. I needed to clear my head. The face in the photo, looming over Mai. The hand from my closet. The oily stain. It was too much. "I'm going to splash some water on my face," I said, my voice sounding distant. "Okay." She didn't look at me. She was staring at the closet door, the one the hand had come out of. She was hugging her knees, curled up on one end of my sofa, trying to make herself small. The bathroom felt like a mile away. I flicked on the light. The bulb hummed. I leaned over the sink, turned on the cold tap, and splashed water over my face. It was cold. It was real. I gripped the edges of the porcelain sink, my knuckles white. I looked up, into my own eyes in the mirror. They were bloodshot. Wide. A stranger's eyes. "Just breathe, Logan. Just breathe." I turned off the light and walked back out into the living room. Mai hadn't moved, but her head was turned. She was staring right at me. Her face wasn't just scared anymore. It was something else. An icy, pointed accusation. "Why?" she whispered. "Why what? Why would you do that?" Her voice was trembling, but not with fear. With anger. "Do what? I don't know what you're talking about." My heart started a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. She didn't answer. She just pointed a shaky finger, not at me. At the bathroom I had just walked out of, my blood turned to ice. I turned slowly, my feet feeling like lead. I walked back to the bathroom doorway and looked in. The mirror. The steam from the hot water pipes must have fogged it over while the door was shut. And written in the condensation in big, shaky letters were words, a message traced by a single fingertip. "One of you will die." I stared. The words seemed to shimmer in the dim light from the living room. It was my mirror, my bathroom. I was the only one who had been in there. "Mai," I said, turning back to her. "I didn't do that. I swear to God, I did not write that." "Don't lie to me, Logan," she hissed, pulling her legs up tighter, a shield against me. "Don't you dare lie to me. Who else could have done it? Who else was in there? Her logic was a steel trap. It was flawless, and it was wrong, and I had no way to prove it. A seed of pure poison was planted between us. I had seen the shadow behind her. She had seen the hand come from my closet. It was his word against hers, and the monster was the only witness. "It wasn't me," I said again, my voice a low, desperate plea. She just shook her head, looking away from me, her eyes locked on the floor. The trust between us, so new and fragile, shattered. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a courtroom after a verdict. We sat in my living room, 10 feet apart, an entire universe of suspicion between us. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, a low, steady hum that sounded too much like the Dreamcatcher's song. Minutes stretched into an hour. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We were just two statues, waiting for the next blow to fall. Finally, Mai stirred. She unwound herself from the couch, moving carefully, like I was a wild animal that might spring. "I need some water," she mumbled, not looking at me. She walked past me into the small kitchen area. I heard the cupboard open, the clink of a glass, the sound of the faucet running. Normal sounds, a lie. Then, a scream, not loud. A short, sharp, choked-off sound of pure shock. I was on my feet in a second, my heart hammering. I ran the few steps into the kitchen. Mai was standing there, a half-filled glass of water in her hand. She was staring at the refrigerator. Her face was white. I followed her gaze. The same words, but this time they weren't traced in steam. They were gouged into the white enamel of the refrigerator door, deep, jagged scratches, as if a claw had raked across the metal. "One of you will die." The metal around the letters was curled back, sharp and ugly. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers hovering over the raw steel. It was real, physical, violent. But that wasn't the part that made my mind snap. The part that broke me was this. When she screamed, when I ran in, she was standing by the sink, in my direct line of sight. She was holding a glass of water. There was no way she could have done this. And I was on the couch, watching her. There was no way I could have done it. We both looked at each other. The suspicion in her eyes faded, replaced by a new, shared horror. A dawning, sickening understanding. "It's here," she whispered, the glass trembling in her hand. "It's in the room with us, right now." It wasn't trying to kill us. Not yet. It was toying with us. It was playing a game, pitting me against her, then her against me, proving that it could be anywhere, that it could do anything, that the very space around us was its weapon. And then the TV flickered on. It wasn't a loud, sudden blast of static. It was quiet. The screen glowed, shifting from black to a grainy, low-resolution image. My cheap flat-screen TV, which I hadn't turned on in a week, was now showing a video. The angle was familiar. It was from the security camera in the hallway, the one down by the elevators. The date and time stamp in the top corner read from 3 hours ago, before the phone call, before the picture. The video showed the hallway. My door, 7A. Her door, 7B. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the door to my apartment, 7A, opened. I watched myself step out. But it wasn't me. Not really. The figure on the screen wore my clothes, had my face, but the eyes were blank, empty. The movements were slow, robotic. A puppet. My puppet body walked across the hall. It didn't knock. It reached out, and the door to 7B swung open without a sound. It stepped inside. The video kept rolling on the empty hallway for a minute. Then my body stepped back out of Mai's apartment, closed her door silently, and returned to my own. My blood ran cold. "What is this?" I breathed. Mai didn't answer. She was transfixed. The timestamp on the video jumped forward an hour. This time, it was her door, 7B, that opened. Mai stepped out. The same blank eyes. The same trance-like walk. She crossed the hall. My door opened for her. She went inside. A few minutes later, she came back out and returned to her apartment. The time she was in my apartment, it matched perfectly with when the message must have been written on the mirror. We were looking at ghosts. We were looking at ourselves. We had done it. Both of us. We had vandalized our own homes. We had terrorized each other. Our bodies had been hijacked, used as tools by the thing that was hunting us. We were the weapons. We were the ghosts in the machine. I looked at Mai. She looked at me. The fear was no longer about a monster in the dark. It was about the monster that could wear our own skin. We had no control. We had never had control. "Oh, God!" Mai sobbed. A low, defeated sound. That's when the video on the screen changed. It wasn't the grainy hallway footage anymore. The image flickered, then resolved into a sharp, clear picture. The colors were vivid, too vivid. It was my kitchen. It was a live feed. I could see the back of my own head. I could see my worn-out gray t-shirt. I could see Mai standing next to me, her dark hair, her hand holding the glass of water. We were both frozen, staring at the TV that was staring back at us. The camera angle was impossible. It was from somewhere high up, in the corner of the room where there was no camera. It was looking down on us. We were watching ourselves, right now. My heart stopped. My breathing stopped. The entire world seemed to shrink down to that glowing screen. Then, on the television, something moved. From the empty space right behind us, a shape began to resolve. It rose up, a column of pure black that seemed to drink the light from the room. It was tall, impossibly thin. A stick-figure man made of nightmare. The shadow from the photo. It had no face, just a long, gaunt head that tilted down at the two figures on the screen, at us. On the TV, we didn't react. We just stood there, staring ahead, oblivious. The shadow moved. It raised two long, skeletal arms. The skin was charcoal black, stretched tight over the bones. They looked like they'd been pulled from a fire. Slowly, deliberately it reached out. On the screen, one of its burned hands came to rest on my shoulder. The other hand came to rest on Mai's shoulder. It stood between us, a silent, dark shepherd with its lost flock. Its presence was a poison, visible only through the cold eye of the screen, and in the real kitchen, standing under the buzzing light, we felt absolutely nothing at all. We didn't move. We couldn't. I don't know how long we stood there, prisoners in my own kitchen, watching a ghost play on a cheap TV screen. My heart wasn't beating. I'm sure of it. It had just stopped. My lungs were stone. The thing on the screen, the charcoal black stickman standing between our oblivious doppelgangers, was a final, undeniable truth. It was here. Not in the walls. Not in the dream. It was in the air between us. My shoulder. The spot where its burned hand rested on the screen. There was no weight, no cold, no touch. There was nothing. And that nothing was the most terrifying sensation I had ever felt. It was a violation on a level one didn't have words for. It was a declaration. I can touch you whenever I want, and you won't even know it. My eyes met Mai's. The suspicion, the anger, the fear of each other, it had all been burned away, replaced by a hollow, shared abyss. We weren't two people anymore. We were just objects in its playhouse. The image on the TV held for another second, an eternity. Then it dissolved into a fizz of black and white static. The hum from the speakers was the only sound in the apartment. The spell broke. Air rushed into my lungs in a painful gasp. Mai dropped the glass. It didn't shatter. It hit the linoleum with a dull thud and rolled under the kitchen table, a small, forgotten thing. "The box," I said. The words came out like gravel. My throat was raw. The dream catcher. It was the only thought I could form. The source. The anchor. Everything started when she brought that fucking thing into her apartment. The humming, the nightmares, the picture. It was the key. Mai's head snapped towards me. A flicker of something returned to her eyes. Not hope. Something harder. Defiance. "We have to destroy it," she said, her voice a low, steady thing I didn't recognize. "How?" "Fire, salt, anything. The internet people say that works. To cleanse things." She was reciting it like a scripture she'd half remembered. A plan. It was a stupid, flimsy plan, born of pure panic. But it was something. It was an action. It was a way to stop being the dolls on the screen and start fighting back. "Okay," I said, my body finally moving. "Okay, kitchen. A pot. A big metal one." We moved with a frantic energy. I pulled the largest stock pot, from the cupboard under the sink, slamming it down on the counter. It was for making chili I never made. Mai was already in the pantry, tearing open a box of coarse sea salt. She poured the whole thing into the pot, the white crystals rattling against the stainless steel. It looked pathetic. A child's potion. "We need something to burn," I said, my mind racing. "Something fast." "Bathroom, rubbing alcohol," she ran. I went to the cupboard where we'd hidden the cookie tin. My hands were shaking. I fumbled with the handle, pulling it open. The stack of plates wobbled. I reached into the dark space behind them, my fingers searching for the smooth, painted metal of the box. I found it. I pulled it out. The floral pattern seemed to mock me. I put it on the counter next to the pot of salt. This was it. The moment we took back control. "Got it," Mai said, running back in, a plastic bottle of 70% isopropyl alcohol in her hand. She put it down next to the pot. She had a butane lighter in her other hand, the kind you use for a grill. We both stared at the cookie tin. "Open it," she whispered. I took a breath. I put my thumbs onto the lid and pried it open. The metal scraped. It was empty. No, not empty. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The bottom of the tin was moving. A churning, writhing carpet of black and brown. Cockroaches. Hundreds of them. They weren't panicked. They were crawling over each other in a thick, purposeful tide. Their antennae twitching in the light. A low, dry, chittering sound filled the space between us. The sound of a million tiny legs on metal. What the? I stumbled back, knocking into the counter. Mai made a sound, a gagging noise deep in her throat. She slapped a hand over her mouth. The smell hit me then. A foul, musty sweetness. The smell of decay. The roaches began to spill over the side of the tin. A living waterfall of filth pouring onto my kitchen counter. They weren't scattering. They were moving together. A unified, black river flowing off the counter and onto the floor. And then we heard it. The hum. It wasn't coming from the TV this time. It was deeper, softer. It was coming from down the hall. From my bedroom. The roaches on the floor changed direction. They stopped moving towards the living room and turned, all at once, as if obeying a silent command. They formed a tight, crawling line and began to march down the hallway, straight towards my bedroom door. A highway of nightmare creatures on my floor. My blood ran cold. I looked at Mai. Her face was a mask of pure horror. She knew. "It's not in the box," she breathed. It was never in the box. We moved, not together. We were just two bodies reacting to the same pull of terror. I stepped over the disgusting trail of insects, my skin crawling. Mai was right behind me. We crept down the hall, our feet silent on the floorboards. The humming grew louder, a resonant frequency that vibrated in my teeth. It was the song from the dream, the lullaby of the thing that was hunting us. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I had left it that way. I put my hand on the cool wood. I pushed it open. The room was dark, the only light spilling in from the hallway behind us, and in the center of the room, it was hanging. The dream catcher. It was suspended in midair, a foot below the ceiling, turning slowly, counterclockwise. There was nothing holding it up. The black feathers drifted in an unfelt breeze. The single bead in the center of its web gleamed like a wet black eye staring into everything. The river of roaches flowed into the room, ignoring us completely. They swarmed the floor directly beneath the floating dreamcatcher, piling on top of each other, creating a writhing, pulsing mound of bodies. They were worshipping it. This was its house now. We were just trespassers. The sight broke something inside me. The fear, the confusion, the helplessness, it all collapsed into a single point of pure, white-hot rage. This thing had taken my home. It had taken my mind. It had worn my face. "No," I snarled. The word was an animal sound. I turned and ran back to the kitchen. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the bottle of rubbing alcohol. I grabbed the butane lighter from Mai's trembling hand. "Logan, what are you doing?" she cried out, her voice thin with panic. I didn't answer. I stalked back to the bedroom doorway. The humming was a physical presence now, pressing in on my ears. The dreamcatcher continued its slow, arrogant twirl. I unscrewed the cap of the alcohol bottle. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, burned away by adrenaline. "Fuck you," I whispered to the thing in the middle of my room. And I threw it. The bottle tumbled end over end, a perfect arc. It struck the Dreamcatcher dead center. Alcohol splashed everywhere, raining down on the mound of roaches below. They skittered and writhed, a new frenzy in their movements. I clicked the lighter. A flame shot out. Without a second of hesitation, I threw that too. It hit the alcohol-soaked web. The world erupted in a flash of noise and light, a violent whoomph that shook the doorframe. The Dreamcatcher exploded into a ball of fire. But it wasn't the sound of wood catching fire. It wasn't a crackle. It was a scream, a high-pitched, piercing shriek of pure agony that tore through the apartment. It was a human sound, a woman's scream, twisted and distorted as if it were being played through a broken speaker. It clawed at my eardrums, a sound of pain so profound it felt like a physical blow. My screamed and covered her ears, stumbling back against the wall. The fire wasn't yellow or orange. It was a sick, lurid green, a chemical, unholy light that cast dancing, monstrous shadows on the walls. It didn't flicker and dance. It burned with a solid, hateful intensity. The room filled with a new smell. Not burning wood or feathers. It was the smell of burning hair and flesh. The scream went on, rising in pitch until I thought my skull would crack open. The green fire pulsed with the sound, a ghastly, beautiful, terrible beacon in the center of my room. The mound of roaches below sizzled and popped, their bodies curling into black, burnt specks. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The scream cut off. The green fire vanished. Not died down. It was just gone. One moment, it was there, a roaring vortex of agony, and the next, there was only darkness and silence. A silence so complete, it felt louder than the scream. The burnt shell of the Dreamcatcher fell from the air. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft, final thump. We stood in the doorway, panting, our ears ringing. The smell of a slaughterhouse hung in the air. Is it over?" Mai whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't know. I couldn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the floor where the thing had landed. I took a shaky step into the room, my phone's flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I pointed it at the floor. The Dreamcatcher was there. It was blackened, charred, and melted in places. The feathers were gone, but the circular wooden frame, the web of sinew, it was intact, deformed but whole. We hadn't destroyed it. We had only hurt it, but that wasn't what made the air leave my lungs. It was the floor around it, the hardwood. The green fire had been so intense, it had scorched the wood in a perfect circle around where the Dreamcatcher lay. The burn marks weren't just random scorches. They were a pattern, a symbol. It was an eye, wide open as if in shock or terror. And inside the pupil, where there should have been only black, another burn mark was etched into the wood. A spiral. A descending, endless spiral. We hadn't cleansed anything. We hadn't won. The fire, the scream, the pain. It wasn't a death throw. It was a branding. It had marked my home. It had signed its work. And in the sudden, ringing silence, I knew a terrible, sinking truth. We hadn't just fought back. We had just helped it do exactly what it wanted. The ringing in my ears wouldn't stop. It was the echo of the scream, a high, thin frequency that vibrated behind my eyes. The air was thick with the ghost of a smell, like a barbecue where someone had thrown a heap of hair onto the coals. We stood there, breathing it in, staring at the floor, at the brand. The open eye burned into my hardwood floorboards. The endless spiral in its center seemed to pull the light from the room, a tiny black hole in my home. We hadn't won. We hadn't even fought. We'd just taken a can of gasoline and thrown it on a fire we didn't understand. We'd given it a voice. We had heard it, and it had screamed, and in doing so, it had signed its name on our world. On my world. Mai was leaning against the hallway wall, her face the color of old paper. Her breathing was shallow, a series of quick, useless little puffs. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at the floor. I looked at the ceiling, a blank white canvas, and saw the memory of the green fire dancing there. We didn't talk. There were no words for this. Apologies were useless. Plans were a joke. What could we do? Call the cops? Officer, my neighbor and I tried to exorcise a dream catcher, and it screamed at us. Call a priest? What would I even say? My body made the decision for me. A wave of exhaustion so total, so bone deep. It was like a physical blow. My knees felt weak. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a black, empty void. Every muscle ached. My mind, which had been racing a mile a second, just stopped. It hit a wall. I stumbled out of the hallway, away from the smell, away from the eye on the floor. I collapsed onto the sofa. The cushions hissed as they took my weight. I didn't sit. I just fell. Mai followed a few seconds later, slumping onto the other end of the couch. She curled into a tight ball, her back to me. We were two strangers on a lifeboat, too tired to even look at each other. Sleep wasn't a gentle drift. It was an undertow. It grabbed my ankles and pulled. I fought it for a second, my mind screaming that sleep was where it lived, that closing our eyes was surrender. But my body didn't care. My eyelids were made of lead. The ringing in my ears faded, replaced by a low hum, the hum from the TV from my bedroom, the hum that was now the background music of my life. It was a lullaby, and it was pulling me under. I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I let go. Darkness took me. It wasn't a cut to black. It was a cut to gray. I was standing. The exhaustion was gone. I was in a hallway. But it wasn't my hallway. The walls were a leprous, peeling green, the color of sickness. The floor was checkered linoleum, cracked and yellowed with age. A single, bare bulb hung from a frayed wire far down the hall, casting a weak, buzzing light that made the shadows thick and deep. It smelled of bleach and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like old flowers left in a vase too long. Mai was next to me. She wasn't curled in a ball anymore. She was standing straight, her eyes wide, scanning our new prison. She looked at me, and her mouth formed my name, but no sound came out. This time, it wasn't empty. The hallway was lined with doors, heavy, wooden doors with small, rectangular windows of reinforced, wire-meshed glass. Hospital doors. An asylum. Each door had a small slot at the bottom, a mail slot for the damned. And we heard it. It started as one voice, a low moan, a sound of dull, endless pain. It came from behind one of the doors to our left. Then another voice joined in from a door on the right. A whimper. Then a third, a soft, rhythmic sobbing. Soon, the entire hallway was filled with them. A choir of misery. They weren't screaming for help. There was no hope in the sound. It was the noise of people who knew no one was coming. The sound of forgotten souls. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just its hunting ground anymore. This was its gallery, its collection. Then the moaning stopped. All at once, the abrupt silence was 1,000 times worse. It left a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to turn and bolt. I couldn't. I looked down, my feet were sinking. The linoleum had turned to mud, a thick, black, clinging sludge that was already over my ankles. It wasn't soft, it was heavy, pulling me down with a dreadful, patient strength. I tried to lift my leg, but it was like trying to pull a post out of wet concrete. I was anchored. Trapped. Mai was crying now, silent tears tracking paths through the grime on her face. She was pulling at her own leg, her fingers sinking into the black muck, her movements frantic and useless. The humming started again, louder than before, deeper. It came from the far end of the hall, from the darkness beyond the single yellow light bulb. A figure stepped out of the shadows. The stickman from the TV. But it was different now. It had substance. It wasn't flat. It was a three-dimensional sculpture of charred bone and stretched, burned skin. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs moving with a slow, disjointed grace. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, scorched surface where its features should have been. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't hunting. It was walking toward us. A slow, deliberate pace. The lord of the manor inspecting his property. In its right hand, it held something that glinted in the dim light. It wasn't a claw. It wasn't a knife. It was a scalpel. Old. rusted, but I could see the edge was still sharp. It held the tool with a horrifying delicacy, as if it were a surgeon preparing for an operation. The mud was at my knees now, cold and heavy. I pulled, straining every muscle in my legs and back. Nothing. I was a fly on flypaper. Mai had stopped struggling. She was just watching it come, her body trembling. Closer. The sound of its feet wasn't a footstep. It was a soft, wet, tearing sound, as if it were walking on torn fabric. It was 20 feet away. The humming vibrated in my chest, a physical pressure. The thing was perfectly silent, but the hum was its voice, its presence, filling the entire world. 10 feet. I could see the scalpel clearly now. The rust spots on the blade looked like dried blood. It raised its empty left hand and pointed a long, skeletal finger at Mai, then at me. Choosing. I felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the mud. It was enjoying this, the fear, the helplessness. This was the meal. It stopped right in front of us, looming over me. It was so tall I had to crane my neck back. I could smell the burned smell again, but stronger now, acrid and chemical. It lowered its head, the blank space of its face just inches from mine. The hum intensified, drilling into my skull. Then it raised the scalpel. The movement was slow, theatrical. It brought the blade up until the tip was level with its head. The rusty metal caught the light from the bare bulb. Time stretched. The world narrowed to that single, sharp point. This was it. This was the end of the game. It was going to mark us, carve us, collect us. It took a half step toward Mai. Something inside me broke. It wasn't courage. It wasn't heroism. It was just a raw animal instinct. A final, useless spasm of defiance. Not her. Not in front of me. My arms were free. The mud hadn't taken them yet. With all the strength I had, I shoved her. A desperate, two-handed push to her side. Go! The word was a choked grunt. She stumbled, falling sideways, her trapped legs acting as a hinge. The entity's head snapped toward me, a quick, insect-like motion. Its body turned. The arm holding the scalpel came down, not in a furious stab, but in a smooth, practiced arc, a surgeon's slice. I tried to twist away, but the mud held me fast. The blade touched my shoulder. There was no pain. Not at first, just an intense, shocking cold. A line of ice drawn across my skin and into the muscle beneath. It was a cold that burned. It felt like the metal was sinking all the way to the bone. Then the pain hit. A white-hot agony that detonated in my shoulder and shot down my arm, up my neck. It was overwhelming, absolute. It erased the hallway, the mud, the entity. There was only the fire in my nerves. A scream tore out of my throat, my own voice, raw and ragged. And the scream woke me up. My eyes flew open. I was on the sofa. The afternoon light was slanting through the dusty living room window. For a second, my brain stuttered, unable to bridge the gap. The dream was still clinging to me, the phantom feeling of the mud on my legs, the smell of antiseptic in my nose. Mai was sitting up at the other end of the couch, her eyes wide with a fresh terror. My scream had woken her. "Logan? What is it? What's wrong? The dream?" I gasped, my throat raw. It had a... I couldn't finish. The pain in my shoulder wasn't a phantom. It was real, a deep, throbbing ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. It was the exact spot. I looked down. My gray t-shirt was dark with a patch of wetness, a spreading circle of deep red. "No," I whispered. It wasn't possible. My hand went to my shoulder. My fingers touched the wet, sticky fabric. I flinched. The pain was sharp, electric. This wasn't a scratch. This wasn't a bruise. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the collar of my shirt and pulled it down. Mai gasped. A sharp, choked sound. My shirt was torn, a clean, straight rip about 5 inches long, and beneath the fabric, carved into my skin, was a wound that mirrored the tear perfectly. It was a deep, straight gash. The edges parted to show the glistening tissue underneath. It wasn't bleeding sluggishly, Blood was welling up, thick and dark, already starting to drip down my chest. It was a clean cut. A precise cut. The kind of cut a scalpel would make. The silence was worse than the scream. It rushed in to fill the space my voice had ripped open. A heavy, dead thing. My ears rang. The living room was too bright, the afternoon sun, a cruel spotlight on the dust motes dancing in the air. Everything was normal. And that was the most insane part. Mai was on her feet, her hands hovering in the air near me, unsure where to touch. Her face was a mask of secondhand shock. "Logan? Oh my God, Logan!" "It's real," I said. The words felt foreign in my own mouth. I pulled the shredded collar of my t-shirt wider. The wound wasn't some vague, bloody mess. It was a line. A perfect, incised line drawn by a geometric god. Blood welled up, dark and thick, refusing to be a trick of the light. It started to trail down my chest, a single, hot track. My brain was a car crash, the dream, the asylum hallway, the figure, the scalpel. It wasn't a memory. It was a cause. And this was the effect. "Kitchen," Mai's voice cut through the noise in my head. "First aid kit, under the sink." She was already moving, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. She had purpose. I was just a slab of meat with a hole in it. I stayed on the couch, my hand clamped over the wound. The pain was real. A deep, insistent throb that said, "I am here. This is happening. You can't wake up from this." I could still feel the phantom cold of the blade, a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Mai came back with a white plastic box and a dish towel. She didn't ask permission. She knelt in front of me, her expression grim. "Take off your shirt." My fingers fumbled with the hem. Pulling the fabric over my head sent a jolt of fire through my shoulder that made my vision white out for a second. I grit my teeth, a low sound escaping my throat. When I could see again, she was staring at the cut. Her breath hitched. "Jesus Christ, Logan?" It was a whisper. "This needs stitches. This needs a hospital." "No," I said, the word coming out sharp. "No hospital. What are we going to tell them? That my dream monster stabbed me?" My attempt at a joke was pathetic, and we both knew it. No hospital. No cops. We were on our own. It wanted us on our own. She pressed the dish towel against the wound, hard. I hissed, "Hold this." I did as I was told. My own blood soaked through the cheap cotton, warm and sticky against my fingers. Mai opened the first aid kit. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were efficient. She pulled out antiseptic wipes and a roll of gauze. "This is going to hurt," she said. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. She peeled back the towel. The air hit the raw flesh, and it was like being stabbed all over again. I watched her clean the edges of the cut. The sting of the alcohol was a sharp, clean pain that was almost a relief from the deep, throbbing ache. She worked without a word, her jaw tight with concentration. The room was filled with the small, clinical sounds, the rip of sterile packaging, the whisper of gauze, the snap of medical tape. When she was done, my shoulder was a clumsy bundle of white. The pain was muted, trapped beneath the layers, but it was still there, a dull, constant reminder. We sat in silence for a minute. The sun shifted, throwing long shadows across the floor. The shadows crawled toward the eye, branded into the hardwood. It seemed to drink the darkness, the spiral in its center a void. "We're not going to make it through another night," Mai said, her voice flat. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the brand. "Sleeping is a death sentence, so we don't sleep." My voice was a rasp. "For how long, Logan? A day? 2? It doesn't get tired." It waited for us to fall asleep on the couch. It was patient. She was right. My body already felt heavy. The exhaustion from before was creeping back, layered now with shock and pain. My mind was a hamster on a wheel, running in frantic circles and getting nowhere. Run? To where? Fight? With what? We'd thrown fire at it, and all we did was piss it off. Mai's gaze was fixed on the brand. "That symbol," she said, her voice barely audible. "The one it burned into the floor. The one on the Dreamcatcher. It has to mean something. It's a signature. It's a name. Her words hit me. It was the first thing that felt like a step, not just a reaction. A name. A meaning. I pushed myself up, my body groaning in protest. The room tilted for a second. Mai started to get up to help me, but I waved her off. I stumbled over to my laptop, sitting closed on the small dining table. I flipped it open. The screen came to life, blindingly bright. For a second, my own tired, pale face stared back at me from the dark reflection, a stranger with a white bandage on his shoulder. I opened a browser. The search bar blinked, waiting. What do I even type? I don't know, Mai said, coming to stand behind me, her arms wrapped around herself. Try Spiral Eye. Endless eye symbol. I typed Spiral Eye symbol. The results were garbage. New Age websites selling meditation pendants, t-shirt designs, tattoo parlors. None of it felt right. It was clean, commercial. What we were dealing with was ancient and dirty. Try something else, I muttered, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about the dream, the asylum, the feeling of old, forgotten things. Ancient symbol, Spiral Eye. Enter. The results changed. Fewer commercial sites, more forums, conspiracy theory pages, obscure academic articles behind paywalls. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the headlines. Ocular glyphs in pre-Sumerian cults. The all-seeing eye, a Jungian interpretation. The gaze of the abyss. Then I saw a link. It wasn't from a university or a shop. It was from a garish-looking website, the kind with a black background and ugly yellow text. It looked like it was designed in 1998. The title of the post was, On Tulpas, Thought Forms, and Spiritual Lighthouses. Lighthouse. The word snagged in my brain. What is it? Mai asked, leaning closer. I don't know. This looks like bullshit, but... I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, image by image. The formatting was a mess. But there, in the middle of a rambling paragraph about Tibetan mysticism and chaos magic, was the symbol. Our symbol. The open eye with the endless spiral. My heart started to pound, a heavy, sick rhythm against my ribs. That's it, Mai breathed. That's the one. I scrolled through the wall of text, my eyes jumping over words, hunting for meaning. The author was some anonymous user named Navigator. He wrote about entities born from intense concentration and fear. Tulpas. Beings willed into existence. He claimed certain people were born with a predisposition, a psychic vulnerability. He called them lighthouses, people whose subconscious minds shone in the dark, attracting things that lurked in the spaces between worlds. Most of it was nonsense, the kind of stuff you'd read on a message board at 3 a.m. But then I saw a sentence, set apart from the rest, as if quoted from another source. I read it aloud, my voice cracking. The one who bears the mark is not the hunted. As the words left my lips, a sound cut through the room, a low, dry rattling. We both froze. The sound was coming from the hallway, from the floor where the blackened, half-melted remains of the Dreamcatcher lay. The charred frame was vibrating against the wood, a frantic, buzzing tremor, and the eye burned into the floor began to glow. It wasn't a fire. It was a soft, green, sickly light, pulsing in time with the rattling. A cold light that gave off no heat but seemed to suck the warmth out of the room. It illuminated the dust motes, turning them into a swirling green galaxy of filth. Logan? Mai whispered, her hand grabbing my arm. Her grip was like a vice. I couldn't answer. My eyes were glued to my laptop screen, because something else was happening. The website I was reading flickered. The text dissolved into a cascade of green and black code, like a scene from a hacker movie. A loud burst of static erupted from the laptop speakers, sharp and painful. Then the static cut out. In the sudden silence, I heard a click. A tiny, mechanical click. I looked up from the keyboard. The small green light next to my laptop's webcam was on. It was staring right at me. The screen went black for a second. Then, new text started to appear, not typed. It resolved into view, fading in from the blackness. It wasn't a website, it was an image. A scanned document. It was yellowed with age, the text faint, written on a typewriter. There was a letterhead at the top, mostly faded, but I could make out 2 words. Haven Asylum. It was a page from a journal. Or a logbook. Dated 1978. My eyes flew across the text, my mind racing to absorb the words. September 12, 1978. Test on patient number 7 has failed catastrophically. The subject, LT, possesses a latent psychospiritual ability far beyond our initial projections. Our attempts to guide his oniric projections resulted in a containment breach. But it isn't a projection. He doesn't dream in the conventional sense. His subconscious is a lighthouse. It screams into the void, and the void answers. He is a doorway. What came through last night, it was not of him. It was drawn to him. It is now anchored to our reality through him. We have tried to seal the gateway. The symbol of the wardens, the spiral eye, was meant to suppress the broadcast, to blind the lighthouse. But it seems to have only enraged the entity he has attracted. It sees the seal as a cage, and him as the key. I fear for him. I fear for us all. My breath caught in my throat. Lighthouse. The same word. The symbol wasn't a curse from the entity. It was a seal. A failed one. A doorway. A key. LT. The initials burned in my mind. They felt familiar. I tried to place them, my panicked brain refusing to make the connection. I looked at Mai. Her face was white. She was reading the screen over my shoulder, her eyes wide with dawning horror. LT. And then, it hit me. A thought so impossible, so fundamentally wrong, that my mind buckled under the weight of it. Logan Tran. My name. My initials. No, I whispered. My own voice sounded like it was coming from a great distance. No, it can't be. My gaze dropped from the screen, down to my hands, resting on the trackpad. My left hand, my palm, turned slightly upwards. I've had it my whole life. I never thought anything of it. A birthmark, just a weird cluster of pigmentation on the fleshy part of my palm, just below my thumb. Doctors said it was nothing. I barely noticed it was there. But now, in the faint green glow from the webcam and the pulsing symbol on the floor, I saw it, really saw it. It wasn't a random splotch. The lines were there, faint, blurred by years of skin and life. But they were there, swirling, a tiny, faded spiral. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The mark wasn't on the floor. It wasn't on the Dreamcatcher. It was on me. It had always been on me. I wasn't being haunted. I was the haunted house. The world didn't shrink. It collapsed. Everything. The room, the glow, the sound, the last 30 years of my life, crashed inward and funneled into a single point, the faint swirling mark on my palm. It wasn't a splotch of skin. It was a brand, faded, worn by time and touch, but it was there. An eye, a spiral. No, the word was a puff of air. It had no sound. No, that's not possible. My thoughts were a broken engine trying to turn over. LT, patient number 7, a lighthouse, a doorway, 1978. How old was I? 32. The math didn't work. None of it worked. But the proof was in my hand. It was a part of me. My gaze snapped up to Mai. She wasn't looking at the screen anymore. She wasn't looking at the glowing brand on the floor. Her eyes were locked on my hand. On the mark. The fear in her face had changed. It wasn't the shared terror of a victim anymore. It was new. It was sharper. It was the fear you have for something you don't understand. Something you might be trapped in a room with. She took a step back. It was a small movement. A shuffle of bare feet on hardwood. But it was a canyon opening up between us. The invisible thread that had connected us in this nightmare, the we, snapped. Her hand, which had been grabbing my arm, was gone. The warmth was gone. Now there was just cold air where she had been. Logan, she said. My name sounded different, brittle. An accusation. It's a birthmark, I said, the words tumbling out, desperate. I've had it my whole life. It's just a birthmark. My own voice sounded like a lie. The memory started to surface. not like a gentle tide, like a flash flood, breaking through a dam I didn't know existed. The night terrors. Not the regular kind kids have. These were vivid. I was 4 years old, screaming that the crooked man was watching me from the ceiling. My parents took me to a doctor. They said it was an overactive imagination. In middle school, it was the sleepwalking. I'd wake up in the kitchen or standing in the hall, my heart pounding, a sour taste in my mouth, with no memory of how I got there. Always the same feeling, that I wasn't alone in my own head. I always thought it was just me. Anxiety, depression, a quirk in my wiring. The dream catcher, I heard myself say, my eyes finding the blackened mess on the floor. When I bought it, the woman in the shop, she stared at me. She said it was for protection against things that call out in the night. I looked at Mai, pleading with her to understand. I thought she was talking about the apartment, but she was looking right at me. The screen of the laptop reflected the sickly green glow from the webcam. His subconscious is a lighthouse. It screams into the void, and the void answers. It wasn't the source, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. The dream catcher wasn't a curse. It was an antenna. It amplified the signal. My signal. My head snapped back up to meet Mai's eyes. The doubt, the fear, it was all there, naked and raw. The trust we had built in the last 48 hours was sand, and the tide was coming in. So, she said, her voice barely more than a breath, each word a chip of ice. All of this. The thing in the dream. The cut. Her eyes darted to the white bandage on my shoulder. It's because of you? The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. It wasn't a question of blame. It was a question of classification. Was I a victim like her, or was I the disease? I'm being dragged into your nightmare? She asked again, her voice cracking, the pure, undiluted terror finally breaking through. Is that what's happening? I had no answer, because I think she was right. My life wasn't a life. It was a waiting room. And the door had just opened. I wasn't the one being haunted. I was the haunted house. And she was just the unlucky soul who had moved in. The rattling started again. It wasn't the frantic buzz from before. This was a low, deep, grinding sound, like bone on stone. It came from the charred circle of the dream catcher. The green light pulsing from the brand on the floor intensified, strobing now, in time with the grinding. The room plunged into green-tinted darkness, then flooded with sick light, then darkness again. Pulse, pulse, pulse. With every pulse of light, the shadows in the room seemed to writhe, to pull away from the walls. My laptop speakers crackled. A single, long tone of static filled the room. The green webcam light, our malevolent star, went out. The screen flashed, the asylum document vanishing. It was replaced by blackness. We were alone in the pulsing green twilight. I wanted to tell her to run. I wanted to tell her to get behind me. I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the canyon that had opened between us. But my throat was closed. My limbs were lead. My eyes were fixed on the floor. Because something was rising from the burned dream catcher. It wasn't smoke. Smoke dissipates. This was gathering. Black dust, soot, and ash lifted from the floorboards, swirling against gravity. They didn't float. They clawed their way into the air, coalescing into a column. It was a silent, violent birth. The grinding sound grew louder, deeper. It wasn't coming from the floor anymore. It was coming from the center of that rising blackness. It took a shape. A vaguely human shape, tall and thin, like a line drawn with charcoal. A distortion in the air. A hole in the world that was shaped like a man. It had no features, no clothes, just a silhouette of pure, absolute black that seemed to drink the pulsing green light. Where its head should be, there was nothing, just an unnerving smoothness, an absence. It stood there, motionless. The grinding stopped. The pulsing light slowed, holding on a steady, low glow. The silence that followed was a physical presence. It pressed in on my eardrums. I could hear the blood roaring in my head. I could hear Mai's hitched, shallow breaths from across the room, She was frozen, a statue in the green gloom. My instincts screamed, "Run! Fight! Do something!" But my body wouldn't obey. I was pinned by the sheer wrongness of the thing in my living room. Then it moved. It didn't walk. It was a slow, deliberate turn. An executioner's pivot. The featureless head swiveled, scanning the room. It passed over the couch. It passed over the dining table. It passed right over as if she were a piece of furniture, as if she wasn't even there. And then it stopped. Its head was aimed directly at me. I felt a pressure in my mind. A gentle probing, like a needle searching for a vein. It wasn't a sound. It was a thought. A thought that wasn't mine. It slithered into my head, cold and ancient. "There you are." The thought was followed by a voice. It didn't come from the creature. It didn't come from the speakers. It bloomed inside my skull, and inside Mai's too. I knew it, a shared violation. The voice was a chorus and a whisper all at once, dry like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. Time to come home, home. The word was a perversion. What home? The asylum from the document? The void it crawled out of? The thing took a step. No sound. It just glided over the floor, a ripple in reality. One step. Then another. It was coming for me. Its focus was absolute. A predator that had finally cornered its rightful prey. It never looked at Mai. Not once. And in that moment of absolute terror, I saw her face. The green light cast her features in sharp relief. The panic was still there, but underneath it was something else. A new and more profound horror was dawning in her eyes. She wasn't the target. She was never the target. She was just collateral damage, a bystander who had wandered into the beam of the lighthouse. The creature didn't see her, didn't care about her, because she didn't matter. She was just noise. I was the signal. The realization hit her like a train. The blood drained from her face. The look in her eyes wasn't, "We're going to die." It was, "I'm going to die because of you." The trust wasn't just cracked. It was annihilated. In its place was a terrible, isolating truth. I was the source. I was the key. I was the doorway. And this thing, this empty shadow born of ash, was the one with the key. It had come to turn it. It raised an arm, a long, thin limb of pure blackness, a hand with too many fingers uncurled. It wasn't reaching out to attack, it was reaching out to take me. My body moved before my mind did. A single, primitive command screamed through my nervous system. Survive! I threw myself backward, a clumsy, graceless scramble away from that outstretched hand of nothing. The motion was pure instinct, the same instinct that makes a rabbit bolt from a shadow. My shoulder, the one with the bandage, hit the hardwood floor. A hot spike of pain shot through me, but it was distant, a radio signal from another country. The black figure didn't follow. It didn't need to. As I landed, it simply stopped. The hand with too many fingers paused in midair. The entire silhouette wavered, like heat shimmer off asphalt. Then it folded, not like a person falling, but like a drawing being crumpled. The head collapsed into the torso, the limbs folded inward, all of it imploding into the single point on the floor from which it was born. The black ash on the floorboards settled, the grinding sound cut out, the pulsing green light from the branded circle on the floor winked out of existence. Gone. The room plunged into the familiar dimness of city night, lit only by the orange glow of a street lamp outside the window. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was deafening. It was a physical thing, a pressure against my eardrums. I could hear the wet, ragged sound of my own breathing. I could hear a car horn blare 2 blocks away. I could hear the faint, terrified gasps coming from the other side of the room. My eyes found her. She was pressed against the far wall, as far away from me as she could possibly get. Her hands were flat against the plaster, as if trying to push herself through it. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes were wide, fixed not on the spot where the thing had been, but on me. The canyon between us was now a chasm. The air was thick with the unsaid. The truth was a corpse in the middle of the room, and we were both just staring at it, afraid to be the first to touch it. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming. My whole body felt like one big bruise. "It wants me," I said. The words came out raspy, torn from my throat. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like something old and tired. "It's always been connected to me." I looked down at my palm, at the faint spiral pattern that now felt like a bullseye, the brand of a target. The nightmares as a kid, the sleepwalking. I always felt like something was watching. From inside my own head, my gaze lifted back to her. I needed her to see, to understand. It couldn't get through. It couldn't touch the world. Not really. It was just a whisper, a bad dream. But something changed. This place. Or maybe just being near someone else. My eyes darted around my own apartment. It wasn't home anymore. It was a containment cell, and the walls were failing. "It used you to get stronger," I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a punch. Our shared dream, it fed it. It gave it a foothold. It found a way to bridge the gap. And that dream catcher, it wasn't a curse. It was an amplifier. I brought a megaphone to a haunted house. I laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. "My house." Mai didn't say a word. She just watched me, her expression a mask of pure, cold terror. The fear was no longer about the monster. It was about me. And then it happened. The lamp on my end table flickered. A weak, anemic pulse of light. I froze. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a panic drumbeat. Thump, 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 thump. The lamp flickered again, in perfect sync with my pulse. Flicker, flicker. I stared at it, my breath caught in my throat. I tried to calm down. I forced myself to take a slow breath in, then out. My heartbeat slowed. Little. The flickering stopped. The light held steady. A new wave of dread washed over me, colder than anything before. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It wasn't just in the dream. It was leaking out. I was leaking. My fear, my panic, it was affecting the world around me. I was a psychic engine, and I was running hot, spewing radiation into the room. My eyes snapped to Mai. Her face was white. She'd seen it too. "Mai," I said, my voice urgent, desperate. "You have to go. Now, get out of here. Go to a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere but here." She just stared at me. "It's me," I pleaded, taking a hesitant step toward her. She flinched, shrinking back against the wall, and I stopped dead. The movement was a knife in my gut. "It's tied to me. If you're not here, maybe it can't. Maybe its connection will be weaker. You have to leave." For the first time she spoke. Her voice was thin, brittle, like a thread about to snap. "Leave?" she asked, a hysterical little laugh bubbling up. "And go where, Logan? Where do I go?" Her eyes were wild. "It knows me now. It's been inside my head. It knows what I look like. It knows my name. What happens when I go to sleep tonight, in some hotel room by myself? Will it be there waiting? Did you give it my address, too?" No, My words died in my throat. I didn't have an answer. I had no idea how this worked. "What if it follows me?" she pressed, her voice rising. "What if leaving you just makes me an easier target? Alone? With no one to even know it's happening?" She shook her head, a frantic, jerky motion. Her eyes locked on mine, and what I saw in them was a new kind of horror. Not just fear of the creature, fear of being abandoned to it, the terror of being collateral damage left behind on a battlefield. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice dropping to a low, determined whisper. "I'm not going out there alone. I can't." Her logic was a cage, and it had just snapped shut around both of us. The apartment door was right there. Unlocked. Freedom was 20 feet away. But she was right. It wasn't a door to safety. It was just a door to a different room in the same prison. We were trapped, not by locked doors or barred windows. We were trapped by the rules of a game we didn't understand. The knowledge hung between us, heavy and final. The room was no longer my apartment. It was a lifeboat for two, with a hole in the bottom that was shaped exactly like me. And that's when it came back. No sound this time. No warning. No swirling ash. My eyes were on Mai, and hers were on me. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision by the front door made me turn. It was just there. The same shape. A tall, thin tear in the fabric of the room, standing directly in the entryway. It blocked the only way out. It wasn't doing anything, just standing. A sentinel. A jailer. It was made of shadow, but it cast one. A long, distorted shape that fell across the floor and climbed the wall behind it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thump, 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 thump. The lamp on the end table exploded. The bulb popped with a sharp crack, showering the floor in glass and plunging our corner of the room into deeper shadow. Mai let out a choked scream. The figure didn't react. Its featureless head was still aimed at the space between us. It seemed to be considering something. It stood motionless for a full 10 seconds. An eternity. The only sound was the crunch of glass under my shoe as I shifted my weight. Then it raised its arm, the same one as before. A long, spindly limb of absolute black. A hand with a suggestion of too many fingers uncurled slowly. It wasn't reaching, it was pointing. It pointed one long, black finger directly at me. A thought, not my own, slid into my mind like a shard of ice. Not a voice, just a feeling. A designation. You. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were stone. The finger held on me for a second. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that was horrifying in its grace, it moved. The arm pivoted. The finger slid through the air until it was pointing directly at Mai. She made a sound, a thin, high-pitched keen of animal terror. She slid down the wall, her legs giving out, until she was crumpled on the floor. The black finger held on her. Another second, another designation. Her. My mind was a hurricane of static. What was it doing? What was the point of this? Then, the creature did the last thing. It kept its finger pointed at Mai. And its head, that smooth, awful blankness where a face should be, turned slowly back toward me. It was looking at me. I felt its gaze like a physical weight. Slowly, deliberately, it shook its head. Once. Twice. The gesture was unmistakable. It was simple. It was human. And it was the most monstrous thing I had ever seen. The message wasn't delivered in a voice. It wasn't a thought pushed into my skull. It was delivered in pure, cold, cinematic language, and it landed with the force of a final judgment. Not both. Only one. The air left my lungs in a rush. The blood drained from my face. I finally understood. I understood everything. The shared dream. The escalation. The way it had ignored her at first, then focused on her terror. This wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't a predator trying to drag its prey back to its lair. It was a performance. It was a test. A cruel, sadistic game designed for an audience of one. Me. It wasn't just here to take me. It was here to break me first. It wanted to feed on more than just fear. It wanted to feed on anguish. On guilt. On the horror of a choice that had no right answer. It was offering me a deal. The kind of deal only a devil would make. It had come to turn the key, just as I'd feared. But it was worse than that. It was handing me the key and forcing me to choose which door to lock from the inside. It wanted me to decide. Me, or her. Who would feed the nightmare tonight? Who would be the sacrifice? The entity stood there, its finger still pointing at the sobbing woman on the floor, its blank face still locked on me, waiting. It was patient. It had all the time in the world. And it was going to enjoy the show. The choice hung in the air, a physical weight. Not both. Only one. The thing in the doorway was a judge. A black, faceless executioner waiting for a verdict. My verdict. My hands were shaking. I could feel my blood, cold and thin in my veins. Mai was a heap on the floor, her breath coming in tiny, hitched sobs. She looked at me. Her eyes weren't asking for help. They were begging me not to say her name. The silence stretched. The shadow didn't move. It was patient. The glass from the exploded lamp crunched under my foot. The sound was a gunshot in the dead room. There has to be a way, I said. My voice was a stranger's, a low, scraped sound. It wasn't for her. It was for me. A desperate prayer against the inevitable. If it's me, if I'm the thing it's latched onto, the lighthouse, then I can steer, I can lead it somewhere. Logic. I was trying to use logic against a nightmare. It was like trying to punch the ocean. Lead it where? Mai's voice was a ghost, a whisper from the floor. Into another room? What good does that do? Away from you, I said, my eyes fixed on the shape by the door. It didn't react. It just stood there. A tear in the world. Pointing at her, looking at me. Maybe I can draw it out. Lure it. If it wants me, it has to follow. A hysterical little sound, half laugh, half sob, bubbled up from her. And what if it doesn't? What if it just takes me while you're trying to play hero? What then, Logan? Her words were knives. She was right. I had no plan. I had a theory. A stupid half-formed hope, born from sheer terror. We were mice in a box, and I was trying to negotiate with the cat. Then, her phone lit up. The sudden light in the dark room made us both flinch. She'd been holding it the whole time, a white-knuckled grip on the small, glowing rectangle. Her thumb was moving. Shaking, but moving, swiping through pages. Her panic wasn't passive, it was active. Frantic, searching for an escape hatch. Any escape hatch. She scrambled on her knees, a clumsy crawl across the floor toward me. She didn't get too close. She stopped a few feet away, a safe distance, like I was radioactive. She shoved the phone at me. Here, she breathed, her eyes wide and dark. Look! I looked down. It was a website. A cheap one, the kind of thing you'd see in the late 90s. Black background, blood-red text. It looked like a fan page for a death metal band. At the top, a pixelated symbol of a spiraling serpent eating its own tail. The headline read, The Cult of the Silent Chorus. What is this? I asked. I was searching, she said, her words tumbling out. For anything. Shared nightmares. Psychic parasites. People being haunted together. It's mostly junk. Forum posts, Reddit threads. But this kept coming up. My eyes scanned the screen. It was mostly rambling nonsense. Prophecies of a great sleeper. Talk of tethers and beacons. Crazy talk. But then I saw a section. A small hyperlink at the bottom of the page. Almost hidden. The text was different. It looked older, like a scanned page from a book. The title was The Ritual of Severance. My heart started a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I read the words. They were simple, direct, chillingly clear. It described a beacon, a person whose unique psychic energy acts like a lighthouse in the dark, attracting entities that drift in the void between worlds. It said the entity, the shade, feeds on the beacon's fear, but when another person is near, fear becomes terror. Terror mixed with guilt, with sacrifice. It becomes a feast. It gives the shade enough power to manifest, to touch, to injure. It's us, I whispered. The words on the screen were a blueprint of our hell. The text described a way out, a last resort, a way for the beacon to cut the cord. It wasn't about banishing the entity. It was about imprisoning it. The ritual would allow the beacon to pull the shade entirely into their own mind, into a constructed dreamscape, and then collapse the exit, to lock the door from the inside. Forever. A self-imposed psychic coma. Trapped in a permanent nightmare with the monster. But the real world would be safe. The other person would be safe. My blood ran cold. No, I said, shaking my head. Yes, Mai insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. Logan, read the rest. I forced my eyes back to the screen. To the requirements. 1. Absolute, unbroken mental focus. The beacon must build the prison in their mind before luring the shade in. Any distraction, any flicker of fear, and the ritual would fail. 2. An amplifier. An object that had already been used to bridge the dream world and the physical one. A conduit that had been soaked in the shared energy of the haunting. My eyes shot to the corner of the room, to the small, blackened hoop lying on the floor. The dream catcher. My megaphone in a haunted house. 3. The warning. A single, final paragraph in stark red letters. Failure is not an option. A failed ritual does not reset the board. It shatters it. An uncontrolled release of energy will not banish the shade. It will fully anchor it to the physical plane. It will be free. It will be real. You will not get a second chance. I looked up from the phone. The shadow by the door hadn't moved. It was still there. Its head turned toward me, its finger pointing at waiting for my answer. This was the other choice, the one it didn't offer. Not me or her, but me, for her. A sacrifice, but on my own terms. My stomach twisted. The logic of the cage was perfect. Run, and it might follow her. Stay, and one of us dies. Or try this. This insane 1-in-a-million shot from some crackpot cult website. The choice was a gun with 3 barrels. One pointed at me. One pointed at her. One pointed at both of us. It's a trick, I said, my voice low. It has to be. Something on the internet. Is it crazier than that? Mai asked, her gaze flicking to the thing blocking the door. Is it crazier than a monster made of smoke standing in your apartment after it gave you a choice from a horror movie? It's the only thing we have, Logan. It's an answer. It's something. She was desperate. But she wasn't wrong. What other move did we have? Wait for it to get bored? That's when the creature moved. It lowered its arm. Slowly. The pointed finger dissolved back into the blackness of its form. Then it took a step, a slow gliding motion into the room. It didn't make a sound. It just moved. It stopped in the center of the living room, right over the faint circular scorch mark its brand had left on the floor. It stood there, a column of pure negation. It was done waiting. The time for choosing was over. Okay, I said, my voice tight. Okay, we do it, right now. Mai nodded, her face pale but set. The terror was still there, but a grim resolve was pushing through it. I moved. My legs felt like lead. I knelt and picked up the dream catcher. It felt cold, but there was a faint vibration coming from it, a low hum that I felt in my bones more than I heard with my ears. The leather was charred. The feathers were gone. It was just a ruined circle, an amplifier. The ritual, I said, trying to remember the text. It says I have to focus, build the prison in my head first. I looked at Mai. I need you to watch it, if it moves toward me before I'm ready. I know, she said. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the metal baseball bat I kept propped in the corner by the coat rack. She scrambled over and grabbed it. The weight of it seemed to steady her. She held it in both hands, a white-knuckled grip, a soldier with a makeshift weapon. It says to start the chant to draw it in, I mumbled, more to myself than to her. The website hadn't given any specific words. It just said to call its name. I didn't know its name. All I had was the feeling, the dread, the core of the nightmare. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, about 10 feet from the creature. My back was to the wall. I held the burnt dream catcher in my lap. I could feel its gaze on me, a cold pressure against my skin. Mai stood to my left, the bat held ready. She was planting herself between me and the thing, a human shield. The guilt was a physical sickness in my throat. Mai, I said, my voice cracking, if I close my eyes and I don't open them again, you run. Don't look back. Just get out the door and run. You hear me? She didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on the bat, her eyes locked on the column of shadow. I took a breath. It shuddered on the way in. I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids was a relief. I tried to focus. I tried to build the prison the website described. A box. A cage made of my own will. I pictured stone walls, thick and windowless. A heavy iron door with a dozen locks. A place with no exit. I tried to pour all my fear, all my focus, into making it real. For a second, I thought I felt something. A flicker of control. It was time. I opened my mouth. I didn't know what to say. I just started to hum. A low, deep tone. The kind of sound you feel in your chest. The sound of the nightmare itself. The sound of grinding. The effect was instant. It started with the dream catcher. The low vibration in my hands intensified, the hoop rattling against my palms. Then, a fork on the coffee table began to buzz against the wood. A high, metallic whine, The metal studs on my jeans grew cold. The fillings in my teeth ached. Everything metal in the room was responding. The sound grew. The buzzing fork became a rattling shriek. The window latch began to vibrate violently. The hinges on the door screamed. A high-pitched metallic wail. The nails in the drywall, the pipes in the walls, the very skeleton of the building began to resonate with the sound I was making. The room had become a tuning fork, and I was the one who had struck it. The sound was deafening, a symphony of tortured metal, and through the noise I heard another sound, a roar. It wasn't a sound made with lungs or a throat. It was a roar of pure static and rage, a sound of existence being torn. My eyes snapped open. The black figure was no longer a silent column. It was distorting, writhing. The edges of it boiled like black smoke. It recognized the ritual. It knew what I was trying to do, and it was furious. With a final shattering roar that vibrated the floorboards, the shadow lunged. It didn't step. It launched itself across the room, a wave of absolute blackness, an avalanche of night rushing directly toward me. It was too fast. I wouldn't have time to react. I wouldn't have time to do anything but die. But I wasn't its first target. A shape moved in the periphery. A blur of motion. My, she screamed, a raw, defiant cry of her own, and swung the baseball bat. She planted her feet, put her whole body into it, and swung the aluminum bat directly at the heart of the charging darkness. She was standing right in its path, a shield of flesh and bone against a tsunami of hate. She was trying to buy me a second. She was trying to hold back the night itself. The bat met the shadow. The bat met nothing. A shock, cold and dead, shot up my arms, a jolt of pure wrongness. It was like swinging at a hologram made of ice. The wood passed straight through the charging darkness, without a sound, without resistance. My momentum carried me stumbling forward, the bat heavy and useless in my grip. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The thing was still there. It had reformed in the center of the room, exactly where it stood before, a silent black pillar. Logan was on the floor, humming. His eyes were shut tight, his face a mask of concentration. His body, it wasn't right. It wavered. It flickered at the edges, like a bad video feed about to cut out. The whole room felt that way. The corners of my vision seemed to swim, the walls breathing in and out with the low, metallic drone that vibrated up from the floorboards. Logan's humming was the engine, and the world was coming apart at the seams. I stood between them, the bat held tight in my trembling hands. A joke of a weapon, a useless piece of metal. The shadow moved, not toward me. It glided to the side, a slow, deliberate slide across the floor. It was trying to get around me. It ignored me, completely, like I was a piece of furniture. A lamp, a coat rack. My blood ran cold. The website, the ritual. It fed on the beacon's fear, but when another person is near, fear becomes terror. A feast. I wasn't the meal. I was the condiment. I was just here to make him taste better. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It couldn't hurt me. Not directly. I was a ghost in its world. An obstacle. No, I whispered, the word lost in the vibrating air. I moved with it, shuffling sideways to block its path again. I planted my feet. You're not getting to him. The thing stopped. It tilted its head, a gesture that held more curiosity than malice. It didn't have a face, but I could feel its focus change. It was acknowledging me for the first time. It recognized my purpose. A dumb, fleshy gatekeeper. Then it changed. The clean, sharp edges of its form began to blur, to run like ink in water. The column of black smoke thickened and swirled, pulling itself into a new shape. Two shapes. A man and a woman. They were old. Their faces were etched with worry. Their clothes were dated. My heart stopped. It was my parents. Mei Ling, the woman shape said, and the voice was my mother's. Not quite right, pitched too high. A recording played at the wrong speed, but it was hers. Honey, what are you doing? Step aside. He's dangerous, the man shape said, my father's voice, rough and cracking with a fake sorrow. He pulled you into this mess. Let them have him. Come home. We miss you. They took a step forward, their arms outstretched. Their faces were perfect masks of love and concern, But their eyes were holes. Empty pits of the same flat blackness as the monster's core. "No," I said, shaking my head. The bat felt heavier. My arms trembled. "You're not them." "Of course we are, sweetie," my mother thing cooed. It smiled, and the expression didn't reach its dead black eyes. "We're so worried. Look at you. You're scared. Let us help you. Just move out of the way." It was a phantom, a trick. I knew it. My brain knew it. But my heart was a traitor. Every instinct screamed to run to them. To let them hold me. To let them fix this. The humming from Logan grew weaker, faltering for a second. The pressure in the room lessened. He was losing focus. My distraction was distracting him. "Fuck you," I snarled, spitting the words. I raised the bat again, my knuckles white. "You're not real." The shapes of my parents flickered. For a second, their faces contorted in a silent snarl of rage, the smooth masks peeling back to show the void underneath. Then they dissolved. The black smoke coiled again, contracting, becoming smaller, leaner. It shaped itself into a single figure, one I knew better than my own. It was Logan. He was standing there, a few feet in front of me, not the humming, flickering Logan on the floor. This one was solid, real. His t-shirt was torn, and a dark, wet stain was spreading across his chest. Blood. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror and pain. "My," he croaked. The voice was perfect. It was his, frightened, desperate. "My, help me. It hurts." He took a staggering step toward me, one hand clutching his chest. The other reached for me. "The ritual? It's not working. It's eating me from the inside. You have to stop it. You have to stop me. Please, hit me. Knock me out. Make it stop." My resolve shattered. This was the choice it had given him. Me or him. Now it was giving me the same choice. Him or him. Let the ritual continue and maybe lose him forever. Or stop it and maybe save him now. What if he was right? What if the website was a lie, a trap to get him to lower his guard? The doubt was a poison, instant and paralyzing. The real Logan on the floor groaned, a low sound of effort. The drone in the room surged, the air growing thick again. The fake Logan in front of me cried out, doubling over. "It's too much! Please, it's killing me!" I couldn't look. I couldn't watch. It was too real. The blood, the voice, the panic in his eyes. It was every fear I had for him made flesh. A weapon made of my own concern. I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't trust them anymore. "Go away!" I screamed into the dark, and I swung. I put everything into it, all my fear, my confusion, my rage. I swung blindly at the spot where the fake Logan had been standing. The bat arced through the air, hitting nothing but the buzzing, charged atmosphere. A pathetic, useless whoosh. A sound answered me. It wasn't a voice. It was a laugh. It was a sound that had no right to exist. It was the noise of cracking bone and grinding metal, of tearing silk and static hiss all at once. It wasn't something I heard with my ears. It was something I felt in my teeth, in my spine, a sound that cracked the foundations of my sanity. My eyes snapped open. The fake Logan was gone. The space in front of me was empty. The black shape was past me. It was kneeling over the real Logan now, a predator over its prey. The humming had stopped. The metallic drone was gone. The room was silent. Deadly silent. Logan's body was solid again, no longer flickering. But his eyes were still closed. His face was slack. I was too late. I had failed. The shadow raised its arm. A long, thin hand with fingers like black glass tendrils unfolded from the mass. It moved with an agonizing slowness, reaching down, down, down toward Logan's face. I tried to move. My feet were nailed to the floor. I tried to scream his name. My throat was filled with cement. All I could do was watch, a statue of terror. The tip of its finger, a point of absolute nothingness, touched the center of his forehead. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then light. It wasn't a gentle light. It was a violent, silent detonation. A flash of pure, sterile white that erupted from Logan's body, from the point of contact. It wasn't a glow. It was an explosion that bleached the world of all color, all shadow. It burned my retinas through my open eyes, a searing, absolute white. A scream tore through the silence. It was two voices at once. Logan's, raw and human and full of agony. And the monster's, that horrible, static-filled roar of rage and existence being ripped apart. The two sounds twisted together into one single, piercing shriek of utter torment. The light and the sound slammed into me like a physical wave, throwing me backward. I hit the wall, my head cracking against the drywall, and slid to the floor. The world swam in spots of black and white. My ears rang with the ghost of that final impossible scream. Then, silence. A heavy, total silence that was louder than the noise had been. I blinked, trying to clear the blinding light from my vision. My head throbbed. The air tasted of ozone, like after a lightning strike. The room slowly came back into focus. It was just a room. The couch. The coffee table, with the fork still lying on it. The shattered glass from the lamp. The baseball bat, which had rolled into the corner. The scorch mark on the floor. Everything was exactly as it had been. But the room was empty. The shadow was gone. And Logan was gone. I scrambled to my knees, my breath coming in, ragged, painful gasps. "Logan?" I called out. My voice was a tiny, broken thing in the dead quiet. "Logan?" No answer. My eyes darted to the spot where he had been sitting. Where I had last seen him, there was nothing there. Nothing but the scuffed wooden floor. My gaze fell on the thing he'd been holding. The conduit. The amplifier. It lay in the center of the scorch mark. The dream catcher. It was no longer a ruined hoop of charred leather. It was just a small, neat pile of fine gray ash. The ringing in my ears was a physical thing, a high-pitched drill boring into my skull. The world was a mess of swimming black spots against a blinding white canvas. I tasted ozone, the sharp, clean scent of a lightning strike indoors. I pushed myself up, my head slammed against the floor again. No, I was already on the floor. I pushed again, my palms flat against the gritty wood. My body felt like a lead weight. My head throbbed in time with the ringing. Blink, blink. The room swam back into focus. Logan's apartment. 7A. The couch. The toppled lamp. The baseball bat in the corner. A child's toy. The scorch mark on the floor. But the room was empty. My breath caught in my throat, a dry, painful hitch. Logan? The silence that answered was heavier than any scream. It was a solid thing, a pressure in the air. He was gone. The shadow was gone. He was gone. I scrambled forward, on my hands and knees, my jeans scraping against the floor. I crawled to the spot. The center of the scorch mark, where he had sat, where the light had come from. Nothing. Just the blackened wood. And a pile of ash. My fingers trembled as I reached out, then recoiled. The dream catcher. It was just a small, neat pile of fine gray ash. Like a cigarette flicked into an ashtray. I stayed there for a long time, I don't know how long. On my knees in another man's apartment, staring at a pile of dust. The ringing in my ears slowly faded, replaced by the thumping of my own heart. The world outside the window began to turn from black to a deep, bruised purple. Dawn. My body moved before my brain did. A series of mechanical actions. Stand up. Legs shake. Grab the wall for support. My eyes darted around the room. Every detail was a fresh stab of pain. His laptop, still open on the coffee table, the web page with the rituals still on the screen. A coffee mug next to it, a brown ring of dregs at the bottom. A jacket slung over the back of a chair. It looked like he had just stepped out. Gone to get the mail. Would be back in a minute. But he wouldn't. There was no sign of a struggle. No blood, other than what I imagined from the phantom. No broken furniture, aside from the lamp I'd knocked over. To anyone else, this was just a messy apartment. An empty, messy apartment. How do you explain this? How do you tell someone that a man was unmade? Eaten by a nightmare? You can't. A new kind of cold seeped into my bones. A different fear. A practical fear. The police. What do I say? A man is missing. From his own locked apartment. And I was the last one with him. The only one. My mind raced, frantically trying to build a story. A lie that could stand on its own 2 feet. A fight. We had a fight. He stormed out. Yes, that was it. Simple. Believable. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the 3 numbers. 911. Was this the right thing to do? Calling them here? Inviting them into this space? This tomb? Before I could decide, a harsh, sudden banging on the door made me jump so hard I almost screamed. Bang! 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 Police! Open up! My blood turned to ice. They were already here. A neighbor must have heard the scream, that final, horrible, twisted scream. Just a minute! I called out, my voice a weak croak. I took a deep breath. A shaky one. Wiped my face with the back of my hand. It was wet. I hadn't realized I was crying. I smoothed down my shirt, ran a hand through my tangled hair. Look normal. Act normal. You're just a girl whose friend stormed out after a fight. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. 2 of them. A man and a woman. Their faces were grim, all business. Their eyes passed over me, then immediately swept the room behind me. Ma'am, we got a call about a disturbance, the male cop said. His gaze lingered on the scorch mark on the floor. A scream. I'm sorry, I said, the lie tasting like acid in my mouth. My friend and I had a fight. He just left. I guess we were loud. Your friend? The woman asked, her eyes sharp. She had a notepad out. Logan Hale lives here, is that correct? Yes, that's him. And he just left, the man asked. He took a single step inside, his boots making a soft sound on the wood. He was looking at the toppled lamp, the baseball bat. Yes, a few minutes ago. He was angry. He just walked out. I didn't look at the pile of ash. I couldn't. I was afraid they would see it in my eyes. The female cop scribbled something down. A fight about what? The questions came fast after that. A barrage. What was my name? Meiling. Just Mai. How did I know Logan? We're neighbors. From across the hall, apartment 7B. How long had we known each other? Not long. A few weeks. Were we in a relationship? No, just friends. Had he been drinking? No. Was I drinking? No. Did he have a history of violence? I don't know. I don't think so. They were walking through the apartment now, their presence a violation. They looked in the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom. Their movements were slow, methodical. They weren't looking for a man who had left. They were looking for a man who was still here, hidden, or worse. The male cop knelt by the scorch mark. He didn't touch it. What's this? My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't know. It was there when I got here. Another lie. They were stacking up, one on top of the other. A house of cards that felt like it would collapse any second. He looked up at me. His eyes were flat, suspecting. He didn't believe me, not for a second. He exchanged a look with his partner. A quick, silent conversation I wasn't part of. I was the outsider, the variable. I was the suspect. The trap had sprung. The monster was gone, but another had taken its place. This one wore a badge and carried a gun. This one had the power to put me in a cage. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of this apartment, and the walls were closing in. You said he just left, the woman said, her voice even. Which way did he go? We didn't see anyone in the hall or the stairwell on our way up. The fire escape, I blurted out. The bedroom. The window. He went out the window. The male cop stood up. Out the fire escape. 7 floors up. In the middle of the night. Because of an argument. He wasn't asking. He was stating the absurdity of my story. He was upset. I insisted, my voice getting louder. Higher. I sounded hysterical. I sounded guilty. They took my statement. My name, my address, my phone number. They told me not to leave town. They said they'd have a forensics team come by in the morning. They looked at me the way you look at a bug you're about to squash. Then they left. I closed the door behind them, my back sliding down the cool wood until I was sitting on the floor. I hugged my knees to my chest and just breathed. The apartment was silent again, but now the silence was different. It was tainted by suspicion. I looked at the coffee mug, the jacket, the laptop. They weren't just Logan's things anymore. They were evidence. I had to get out of there. I walked back across the hall to my own apartment, 7B. My key slid into the lock. The click of the deadbolt sliding home was the loudest sound in the world. I was home. I was safe. But I wasn't. The exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. It was a deep, soul-crushing weariness that went beyond lack of sleep. I stripped off my clothes, leaving them in a pile on the floor, and crawled into bed. I pulled the covers up to my chin. I braced myself. I waited for the pull of sleep, for the familiar dread of the long, dark corridor, for the metallic hum to start in the back of my skull. I waited for the nightmare, and for the first time in weeks it didn't come. Sleep took me like a stone dropping into a black, bottomless well. There were no dreams, no corridors, no shadows, no fear, just a deep, dreamless, empty void. It was exactly what I had prayed for. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window, thick and dusty. My body ached. My mind felt scoured, clean. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. The silence. It was a perfect, pristine silence. No hum, no whispers from the vents, no feeling of being watched. The presence that had haunted my every waking and sleeping moment was gone. The connection was severed. The price for that silence was Logan. I was free. He was gone. The thought was a simple, brutal equation. My phone was on the nightstand. I picked it up, my fingers moving on autopilot, scrolling through notifications. Junk mail. A news alert. And then I saw it, the last message exchange between me and him. From yesterday. A lifetime ago. My last message to him, I'm coming over. His reply, sent just moments before I knocked on his door, before he started the ritual that erased him from the world. My eyes traced the words on the screen. Thanks for not leaving me alone. The dam broke. A sob clawed its way out of my chest, raw and ragged. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the floor. I curled into a ball, the sunlight feeling like a violation, the silence feeling like an accusation. He had thanked me. He had thanked me for being there as he sacrificed himself to save me. I had run from a monster for weeks, only to be rescued by a man I barely knew. And I had watched him pay for my freedom. The nightmare was over. But a new one was just beginning. The monster wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was inside me now, a quiet, lingering specter made of guilt. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would have to live with it for the rest of my life. I was alone. Finally, truly alone. 6 months. That's how long it took for the screaming to fade. 6 months of looking over my shoulder, of my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest every time I heard a footstep in the hall late at night. 6 months of sleeping with a lamp on, waiting for a nightmare that never came back. The silence Logan bought for me with whatever happened to him was a heavy, expensive thing. I paid for it every day. They never found him. The cops questioned me for weeks. I was the neighbor from 7B. The friend. The last person to see him. The prime suspect. They tore his apartment apart, and then they tore my story apart. But they found nothing. No body, no weapon, no motive that stuck. Just a girl who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a guy who vanished into thin air. Eventually, they stopped calling. The case went cold, a file in a forgotten cabinet. The landlord put a fresh coat of paint on the walls of 7A, sanded and restained the floorboards where the scorch mark had been, and put it back on the market. For 6 months, it sat empty, a dark, quiet space across the hall. A tomb. And then, last week, someone moved in. I saw the movers first. Then I saw him. A kid. Looked like a college student. All flailing limbs and nervous energy, trying to direct two huge guys with a sofa. He had dark, messy hair and the kind of cheap, hopeful furniture you buy when you're just starting out. He caught my eye once, gave a little wave. I just nodded and ducked back inside my apartment. I didn't want to know his name. I didn't want to know anything. I just wanted him to be a ghost, a presence I could ignore. But the building has thin walls. Tonight I heard him. He was on the phone, his voice a low grumble at first, then rising in pitch and frustration. An argument. No, that's not what I said, Chloe. For the 10th time, my phone died. I know. Look, can we just not do this right now? A pause. A long one. Fine, whatever, fine. The words were clipped. Angry. I heard the muffled thud of his phone hitting something soft, probably the bed. I turned the volume up on my TV. I didn't want to hear it. It wasn't my business. It was just life. Normal, messy life happening in apartment 7A. And that should have been a comfort. It wasn't. A new sound started. Faint. I muted the TV, straining to listen. It was a sound I knew. A thin, electronic whine. A corrupted melody. My blood went cold. It was coming from his apartment. No, it couldn't be. I was imagining it. Just my mind playing tricks on me because I heard him get angry. That's all. It was nothing. I was safe. The connection was broken. It was gone. Logan made sure it was gone. I stood there in the middle of my living room, my body rigid, my ears straining against the silence. It stopped. Of course it stopped. It was never there to begin with. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My hands were shaking. Stupid. I was being stupid. Then I heard his door open. Heavy footsteps in the hall. A sharp, frantic series of knocks on my door. Bang! 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 It wasn't a neighborly knock. It was a drummer pounding on a coffin. A desperate, terrified sound. For a second, I couldn't move. My feet were nailed to the floor. My mind was a blank, white wall of panic. It's him. The kid. Why is he knocking on my door like that? What does he want? The knocking came again, harder this time. Hello? Please? Anybody home? His voice was high, cracking. I took a breath. And another. Unlocked the deadbolt. Turned the knob. I pulled the door open just a crack, the security chain still engaged. The kid, I still didn't know his name, was standing there. His face was slick with sweat. His eyes wide and wild. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on something over my shoulder, inside my apartment. You heard that right? He gasped, pointing a shaking finger past me. The music! It came from in here. My heart stopped. What music? I whispered. That song. That weird fucking song. My phone, it recorded it. It said the file came from your Wi-Fi. He held up his phone. The screen was lit up. It was an audio file. The name was a jumble of random letters and numbers, a string of digital chaos. But it was playing, and I could hear it, faintly. The same metallic, broken lullaby. The song of the long, dark hallway. The hum of the shadow. It wasn't gone. It had never been gone. It was in my apartment, right now. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I slammed the door shut, ignoring his shouts. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers like clumsy sausages. The lock clicked into place. I leaned my back against the door, my whole body trembling. It's here. It's in here with me. I scanned my living room. The lamp. The couch. The TV. It was all exactly as I'd left it. Empty. Safe. But the feeling was back. The cold pressure in the air. The sense of being watched by something just on the edge of sight. The sound from the kid's phone was gone, but the silence it left behind was worse. It was mocking me. The thing I had feared for 6 months was not gone. It was just dormant, waiting. And this kid, this stupid, unlucky kid, had just woken it up. He was still yelling in the hallway. Hey, what the hell? Let me in! I think someone's in your apartment! I slid down the door to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. I couldn't answer him. What could I say? Run! Get out of this building and never look back! There's a monster here that eats people, and you just rang its dinner bell. Then, a new sound. From inside, a soft, scratching noise. It came from my bedroom. Scrape, 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 like fingernails dragging slowly across a wooden floor. My breath hitched. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. He's in there. No, not he. It. It's in my bedroom. The one place I thought was safe. The place I had finally learned to sleep again. Hey! The kid yelled from the hall. I'm calling the cops. Good. Call them. Let them come. Let them find whatever is in my bedroom. Let them see I'm not crazy. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Complete. My own breathing sounded like a hurricane in my ears. I stayed frozen against the door, listening, waiting. For what? A scream? A footstep? Then I heard it. A faint click, the lock on my bedroom door, unlatching from the inside. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, unbearably slowly, a millimeter at a time, the brass catching the dim light from the living room lamp. This was it. The nightmare wasn't waiting for me to fall asleep anymore. It was coming for me now, wide awake. My body screamed at me to run. But where? Out the front door, into the hallway where the terrified kid was? Out the window and down the fire escape? Into the night? The bedroom door creaked open. An inch. 2 inches. A sliver of perfect, consuming darkness appeared in the gap, and from that darkness, a voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a growl. It was Logan's voice. Calm, clear, exactly as I remembered it. "My," he said, "you left the door open." My mind shattered. That was it, the breaking point, the single, impossible sentence that snapped every thread of sanity I had left. A guttural sob of pure terror ripped from my throat. I scrambled away from the door, crab-walking backward across the floor, my eyes locked on that sliver of black. I had to get out. I lurched to my feet, my legs like jelly. I didn't think, I just acted. I ripped the security chain off its housing, the screws tearing from the wood. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. The kid, Kevin, his name must be Kevin, was standing there, his phone to his ear. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. He started to say into the phone. I didn't stop. I shoved past him. I ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I threw open the door to the stairwell and plunged down, my feet pounding on the concrete steps. My own sobs were echoing in the narrow space, chasing me down. 7 floors. 6. I could hear the kid yelling my name from the top of the stairs, but his voice was distant, unreal. The only thing that was real was the cold, hard certainty that I was being hunted again. And this time, there was no Logan to stand in the way. This time, there was no one to sacrifice themselves for me. I burst out of the lobby door and into the wet, cold city night. I didn't look back. I just ran and ran, until the air burned in my lungs and the lights of the city blurred into streaks of pain behind my tears. I was alone again. Hunted and alone. Kevin's POV. I watched her run. This woman, this complete stranger from 7B, just exploded out of her apartment like she was on fire and vanished down the stairs. The sound of her screaming echoed up the stairwell long after she was gone. "Hello? Sir, are you still there?" The 911 dispatcher's voice buzzed from my phone. "Yeah," I said, my own voice shaky. "Yeah, I'm here. My neighbor. I think she needs help. She just ran out of the building screaming." I gave them the details. Apartment 7B. Her name was Mai, I guess. I didn't know. I was still trying to process what the hell had just happened. The weird music. Her face at the door. The way she looked through me. The cops said they were on their way. I lowered the phone, my hand trembling slightly. What was that all about? Was she on drugs? Having some kind of psychotic break? And that song, where did it come from? It had to be a glitch. A corrupted file from a dropped call. It had to be. I walked back towards my door, 7A. The door to 7B was still wide open. I hesitated. Should I look inside? No. Hell no. That was a job for the police. I went back into my apartment and shut the door, making sure the deadbolt was locked. The silence in the room was suddenly heavy. Uncomfortable. My fight with Chloe, the reason this whole crazy night started, felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. I stood in the middle of the living room, just listening. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren, probably for me. For her. My anger and frustration had evaporated, replaced by a deep, creeping unease. This building was weird. This whole situation was weird. I needed to sleep. I just wanted this day to be over. I walked into my bedroom, kicking off my shoes. The room was dark, the only light coming from the streetlights through the window. It painted long, distorted shadows on the walls. I didn't bother turning on the light. I was too tired to care. I just wanted to crash. I flopped down onto the bed, the mattress sighing under my weight. I closed my eyes, trying to force the image of that woman's terrified face out of my head. Just a crazy neighbor. That's all. In a city of 8 million people, you're bound to get one. I rolled over, bunching the pillow under my head. Something was wrong. There was a lump. A small, stiff thing under the pillowcase, right where my cheek should be. I sat up, annoyed. Did a spring pop in this cheap-ass pillow? I reached under, my fingers closing around the object. It was thin, long, and oddly smooth. I pulled it out, holding it up in the dim light from the window. It was a feather. A single, long, black feather. It was glossy, almost iridescent, like a sliver of polished night. Where the hell did this come from? I don't own anything with feathers. I stared at it, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was watchful. It was waiting. And from the darkest corner of the room, a low hum began to vibrate in the air. It was the same sound. The same broken metallic lullaby from my phone. But this time, it wasn't coming from a speaker. It was coming from the shadows. And it was getting louder. Tour.